Ah, espérate. We're going to start. Ah, tenía acá. Good morning, everyone. Buenos días. ¿Están? ¿Ya llegamos todos? ¿Sí? El silencio. Silencio con los oídos. Bueno, es mi honor empezar el día 2. Creo que esta parte de bienvenida quiero hacerla en español porque veo mucha gente que se tomó el avión y está acá con nosotros acompañándonos en un día muy especial. Que el ChileMass Innovation Day fue formado para juntar gente, para que ustedes tengan conversaciones, para que se conozcan, para que generemos ese match que tiene que suceder entre la gente de Massachusetts y de Chile. Así que eso es lo que voy a decir hoy día en español. Muchas gracias por estar aquí. Today we are in Harvard, we are really grateful for the office here to give us the space, to give us the constant support that they have been giving us. And as you see, ChileMass is across the state, so MIT, Harvard, and the other universities are part of this ecosystem. So we really love that idea that how can we really connect Chile with the state of Massachusetts in a meaningful way. A meaningful way means people. People like you that has ideas, that has challenges for entire cities, that has a commitment to really, at the end of the day, make a better country, make a better state. And that's how we are really committed to do with the ChileMass team and me representing the board. I'm Julie Fuentes, the president of the board of ChileMass. As a representative of people who have been thinking in this dream to really create a bridge between the state and the country, for me, seeing you here is really, we are just starting to make this happen. This is just the beginning. Just the beginning after 10 years of really kind of creating connections in a meaningful way. And I think in the next 10 years, we're gonna see way more results. But those results are gonna happen if you, who are here, stay committed to our big mission, which is make things happen. Today, we're gonna focus in a really important topic. Yesterday in MIT, we were talking about the future of medicine, the future of food, the future of thinking and innovation with ESG in mind, and the future of societies. At the end of the day, what we humans decide to do is what really is gonna happen in the next century. So ChileMass always is gonna be the ear for those changes and connecting people with that mindset. The two panels that we're gonna see today is focusing energy. If we don't solve the energy problem in the planet, if we don't learn the basic knowledge of thermodynamics, of where are we really taking energy in and turning energy out, we're not gonna be able to survive as a species in planet Earth. So it's really relevant that a country like Chile, with the support and with the help and with the initiatives that are also happening in Massachusetts, create a relevant conversation of what is going to happen in the energy sector in our country, and also things that are happening here in the state. We're going to have the representative of state here from Massachusetts. Then we're going to talk about investment and the moment that things are happening and how do we really deploy the capital that has to be there for people to really concrete those ideas. So that's happening today. the last thing I want to say is that what do we need from you? And I'm sure my colleague Brittany, which is also the representative of Massachusetts in the board, is going to end with this, but I want to start with that. Repetition is the art of making things happen. Time. Volunteer. Give us your time to keep doing these activities. We need to mentor. We have the entrepreneurs from Chile. If you think you can help in some way, tell us. And we will be ready to channel that energy in real change. Money. For companies that want to be part of this, we need that funding. Otherwise, things are not going to happen. So let's think creatively, how can we bring funding for this philanthropic organization that is really making changes happen? And finally, love. We don't do this if we don't love our respective countries. I always think that this is about people. It's not about a territory. It's about the better life of people, and that is embraced in the DNA of the mission of ChileMass. Okay? Are we ready to start day 2 of ChileMass Innovation Day? So to continue, we're going to continue with Marcela, who has been really important to the ChileMass mission, and she's going to welcome you to Harvard. And for those coming from also Concepcion, I want to give us hi Concepcion. I'm from Concepcion, so I have a bias of love for the city. So Marcela, welcome.
Okay, I need my glasses, and I'm gonna read. So, I'm so happy to see many faces that I saw. I'm so happy to see many faces that I saw yesterday. Welcome to Harvard University on your second day of the ChileMass Innovation panel discussion. Today, you are here at the David Rockefeller Center for Latin American Studies, better known as Doctor Class. My name is Marcela Renteria, and I am the executive director of the Harvard office in Chile. For all of you who doesn't know, we have a Harvard office for the last 20 years in Chile. There's a long history of support and collaborations since the beginning of the ChileMass Foundation and its launch in Santiago 10 years ago. I remember vividly that moment in Santiago, which is really nice to see this happening here. We are thrilled to contribute today with the emerging ideas that will transform the world. Having conversations among Chilean experts about energy for a cleaner future. I am very happy to welcome my professor, Harvard Business School, Forrest Reinhardt, also the chair of the Andes and Southern Cone program, which is the program that the Chile office is under, and my colleague, Cristian Rodriguez Schifele, who will be on the first panel. It's very stimulating to see many Chileans gathering together, exchanging cutting-edge ideas with academics, scientists, researchers, and professionals from Massachusetts. Cristian is also a LUXIC visiting scholar. Yesterday we had an incredible forum for the new constitution in Chile, where we were discussing these ideas for 2 years, and first time in person was yesterday and was very meaningful. Themes like energy, efficiency, environmental protection, strategic venture capital, and economic development will be discussed here at Harvard. And we will be glad to collaborate once Chileans go back home with our Chile office and ChileMass. I see so many familiar Chilean faces here in a different context, shining in this new environment, thinking about what is next. How can we become better citizens of the world? And how to replicate what is promising in other parts of the world to benefit Chile, and how Chile can contribute equally with its human capital, knowledge, connections generated here in Massachusetts. Thank you to ChileMass. The mission of Dr. Class is to increase knowledge of the cultures, economies, histories, environment, and contemporary affairs of Latin America, foster cooperation and understanding among the people of the Americas, and contribute to democracy, social progress, and sustainable development throughout the hemisphere. This is why we accepted 2 years to develop this program here at Harvard with ChileMass, but it was when the pandemic hit us all. We postponed for a few months, we thought, never thinking that we needed to wait this long time to reunite. Now, with more certainty, I can assure you that the connection made today and the dialogues that are happening will continue fostering institutional collaborations. One more time, welcome, and a special thanks to my friend Julie Fuentes, to Fernanda Sosa for trusting us. Thank you all for being here, especially those for crossing the American continent to meet all of us here in Cambridge. Welcome.
Thank you, Marcela. It's true, 10 years, and we keep going. Another important group represented today by Claudia is the Embassy of Chile in the United States. ChileMass exists because a political agreement between the state of Massachusetts and Chile. And that got to get transformed in an organization that now is a nonprofit. So with that, I want to welcome Claudia to give some thoughts from the perspective of the ambassador and the embassy here in what is the future for this. And also, I see here Hector Garcia, who is from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And I want to say thank you to Hector because he's also been really important for making this ChileMass dream happen when we were saying, yes, we're going to transform a political agreement in an organization that works. So innovation in diplomacy can also work. Claudia.
Hola, buenos días a todos. Voy a tomarme también la libertad de hablar primero en español para saludar a todos los que vienen desde Chile. Muy buenos días en nombre del embajador Juan Gabriel Valdés y el mío también. Y también estas primeras palabras en español para agradecer al board de ChileMass, también al equipo, a Yuli, a Marcela, María José y Fernanda, por supuesto, por el esfuerzo que ponen día a día y por el compromiso que vemos en todo lo que está pasando. Me impresiona ver que cada vez son más y cómo va creciendo este grupo. Bueno, los saludo a todos ustedes y a quienes también nos acompañan virtualmente desde lugares remotos, me imagino. The Embassy of Chile in the United States is celebrating the first Chilean Innovation Week in the United States with activities in Seattle and today and yesterday here in Massachusetts. This initiative rose from the need for the public and private sector to work together to enhance the national capacity that the country demands in a world where innovation is a fundamental element in the development equation. We are very pleased to have been able to organize and coincide these two very important events, the Innovation Week and the ChileMass Innovation Day in the United States. Today, more than ever, the leap to development requires public policy to allow us to face the challenges of the third industrial revolution in a world that is changing at a dizzy pace. We need more efficient response as well as a long-term design to allow a more equitable development to benefit all sectors of all society. And in this effort, the development of the clean energy represents enormous advantage, but also challenges for all of us. Ambassador Juan Gabriel Valdés, who had to travel to Chile because of Secretary of State Antony Blinken visit Chile this week, asked to make convoy to you all, although your presence here is very important because one of the greatest challenges for country today, regardless of their size, is to create competitive but also environmental responsible societies. Chile and the United States have expressed their willingness to work together on energy issues. Chile wants to accelerate the energy transmission processes, and the United States is a strategic partner in these regards. The organization of innovation and advanced human capital is essential to consolidate national capacity to maximum Chile potential in terms of green hydrogen and lithium. For that goal, a space like this is essential. So thank you very much, ChileMass, for thinking in that. And thank you very much to all of you, and I hope that you enjoyed today. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. Well, with that, we are going to start the program of the day. Our first panel is going to be led by here my colleague Christian Rodriguez, who I'm just by looking at you saying thank you for all of these years too. We were just remembering when we were students in here, he was in Harvard and MIT, and people wanted to solve energy, and we got a call from the ambassador, so I think he might tell more about that. I know. And we continue talking about energy. So with that introduction, I'm going to let Christian come to the podium. The podium is yours, Christian.
I guess maybe instead of the podium, maybe we could just invite the panelists to sit down. So Galen, Forrest, Ignacio, and Felipe, if you're somewhere around. Any order you like. Hola. Bien, mucho gusto. ¿Dónde quieres? Forrest, maybe just the corner so that it's an easier. Como quieran, pero creo que great. Thank you, Yuli. Thank you, Fernanda. Thank you, ChileMass, for the wonderful invitation. My name is Christian Rodriguez. I'm a senior advisor at the Boston Consulting Group, and most importantly, a fellow here at the David Rockefeller Center for Latin American Studies, working for my boss there, Marcela Renteria. I'm delighted to be moderating this panel called Clean Tech: Energy for a Clean Future. And I think Julie already kind of started the story I wanted to tell. So just a little bit of an anecdote here. Ran around 2011, 2012, and a group of students led by who has been leading Chilean students in Massachusetts for the last number of years, Yuli Fuentes, gather around the topic of energy. And we actually name ourselves. We were the Chile-Boston Energía initiative, and we basically met at MIT, I think, twice a week or so, and we started to brainstorm and think, how could we really foster and develop the relationship between the Commonwealth and Chile in terms of energy, right? And if you think about 2011, what was happening in terms of renewables, particularly in Chile, kind of starting, still prices very high, it was really kind of the right time. So there we were, trying to develop this, and one day our boss, Yuli, gets a call from Ambassador Felipe Bulnes, who at the time had started to push this little initiative that you may know called the ChileMass. And it was basically Felipe Bulnes and, of course, Governor Deval Patrick, and they were like, Yuli, we want to put a panel on energy, can you help us? And then comes Yuli and tells to the group and say, hey, we had this amazing opportunity to actually work in the thing. I'm not sure I'm convinced about the name. Their name called ChileMass, but why not? So then, long story short, then we were no longer Chile-Boston Energía, but we were just the students ramp up in ChileMass, and that's how actually from the student side, really energy, and particularly renewable energy, was the birth and the cradle for the student community in Boston engaging in ChileMass. So fast forward 10 years, and it's really, really rewarding to see what Yuli, what the board, Marcelo, others, Fernanda, etc., have done really for the collaboration of the Commonwealth and Chile, and particularly for Chile in terms of renewables. So it's really a job well done, and one of the most beautiful initiatives that I've seen in Chile overseas. So with that long introduction, I'm going to introduce the panels here for this discussion, and then move on move on with it. So first, we're really honored with the presence of Professor Forrest Reinhardt, who's a global expert on the interface between climate change, business, and energy. He is the John D. Black Professor of Business Administration at the Harvard Business School and the co-chair of Harvard Business School's Global Energy Seminar. At HBS, he teaches a course on global markets, helping business leaders understand the economic and political environment in which business are conducted, and also serves as course head for the required MBA course strategy. Reinhardt currently serves as the faculty chair of Harvard Business School's Asia Pacific Research Center, as chair of the HBS Executive Education Asia Pacific region, and most importantly, as Latin America chair and the Standard co-chair of the David Rockefeller Center for Latin American Studies here. So we're very thankful for your collaboration with Dr. Klaas. Felipe de Musi at the center spent more than 15 years leading private and public sector projects in Chile, working closely with local and indigenous communities. Throughout his career, Felipe co-founded an educational NGO, founded different business, coordinated public investment in community infrastructure, and also served at the Chamber of Deputies in the Chilean Congress from 2014 to 2018, focusing on finance, labor, and human rights. Since 2019, Felipe has been part of Lilac Solutions, a company that seeks to scale lithium solutions by applying a technology that extracts the mineral without the need for evaporation ponds, where currently he's the president for South America, and I believe that's what you will tell us a little bit about your experience there. Galen Nelson, also an honor to have you here, is the Chief Program Officer at the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center, MassCEC, as most of you know it, where he oversees technology and market development programs and initiatives across the organization's buildings, transportation, and net zero grid sectors. Galen serves of MassCEC executive team, helping to inform organizational strategy and direction, and oversees the organization's emerging climate finance work. Prior to his role, Galen led MassCEC Innovation and Industry Support, where he created and managed several tech-to-market and commercialization acceleration programs, including in the microgrid, energy storage, and high-performance building sectors. Last, but certainly not least, Mr. José Ignacio Escobar, a civil engineer of industries with diploma in electrical engineering from Universidad Católica de Chile, a master in economic regulation from Universidad Adolfo Ibáñez, has over 20 years of experience in the renewable energy industry, where he's been characterized for having an active role in the development of these technologies in Chile. After founding and developing several companies related to solar and wind energy, in 2014 he joined the Spanish firm Acciona, first as General Director of its energy business unit in Chile, and then as General Director of South America Energy Platform. In 2022, he became the CEO of Colbún, one of the leading energy companies in Chile, with the aim of accelerating its growth in renewables, energy solutions, and expansion in the region. In addition, between 2017 and 2022, he was president of Acera, an association that promotes the development of renewable energies in Chile. So as you can see, very, very excited to have this fantastic panel with us. And actually, a little bit of a virtuous cycle there between Professor Reinhardt and Jose Ignacio, because Professor Reinhardt, 10 years ago, I believe, wrote the first case at Harvard Business School on Colbún, and is further developing that work. So I think he's of course, passionate about energy, and particularly renewable energy, and he will certainly, honor us with opening this panel now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Christian. Thank you, everyone, for your presence here. It's an honor to be invited to be in this panel. As you heard, everybody else on the panel is an expert in Chile or an expert in renewable energy or both, and I am neither, so I represent the rest of us here in Massachusetts, the other 7 million. But it is true that about a decade ago, I wrote a business school case about Colbún. Jose Ignacio was not yet at the firm. He was still in primary school, I think, but as some of you know, a case at the business school, it's not like a law case. It's an opportunity to have a discussion, right? And I wrote the case because I wanted to have an easy way of communicating some very simple lessons about the basic politics and basic economics of energy supply, because I think, and I continue to think, that too many of the conversations we have about energy supply, at least in this country, are sort of divorced from the fundamental economic realities of energy, right? So when I've taught this Colbún case, I think more than I've taught any other single case that I've ever written. So it's valuable for teaching these basic lessons. Maybe this is all old news to all of you, I hope so. But there's a huge fundamental difference between technologies that are cheap to build and expensive to run, like natural gas, and technologies that are expensive to build but then cheap to run, like wind. And the implications of those choices matter a lot for the firms and for society, and how you make those trade-offs depends on capacity utilization and on on the discount rate, on the opportunity cost of the capital, right? So we have to, I think, relate the discussions about clean energy to broader questions in society about capital allocation and economic development. And that's the first sort of framing point that I want to make, is that to many people in the environmental community, I think it's self-evident that the energy problem is fundamentally an environmental problem, and that the central challenge is decarbonization. And it's important to remember that there are lots of smart, well-intentioned people who just don't see energy that way at all. When they see energy, they don't think primarily or first about the environment. They think primarily about national security, and they think of security of supply as being the overarching objective of energy policy. And that's not an illegitimate view, as we've seen, especially in the last year or so. Similarly, other people would look at the energy business and say, look, the access to energy, to affordable energy, is fundamental to economic development, both at the household level and at the national level. And so the overarching principle of energy policy ought to be the provision of inexpensive energy in the short run at the private costs. And of course, there are trade-offs among these objectives, right? That's what makes energy difficult and complicated and challenging. And it's a good thing that we've got all these amazingly talented people, of whom the representatives of this panel are a small sample, to help us with these problems. So let me just say a word about that 10-year-old case. The case had some cost data in it, right? Like capital cost per megawatt, capacity utilization, operating cost per megawatt hour. And in the 10 years since I wrote that case, those numbers have changed, not a little, but a lot, right? Like, so natural gas prices in Chile first plummeted because of fracking and the development of a liquefied natural gas fleet, and then more recently resurged because of the war in Europe. Meanwhile, on the renewable front, as you all know, the capital cost per megawatt of wind and photovoltaic fell by maybe 50% at the same time as theoretical capacity utilizations were doubling. So that means 2 times 2 is 4. It means that the cost per megawatt hour went from something like $100 to something like $25. And that is an amazing transition in over a period of 10 years. Now, but the second point that I want to make is the costs have changed a lot. The quantities are much stickier, right? It takes a long time to move an electrical energy system because of sunk costs, because of the installed capital base, and because of the time to build the renewable energy systems that I think most or all of us want and expect to see over the next decades. But it takes time, and I think that our collective impatience and its political consequences is actually kind of a serious problem. Like, we have political leaders all over the world who are making big statements about what our children and grandchildren are going to do, and about net zero or carbon neutrality by some year that always ends in 0 or 5, right? And the danger is that when we miss those targets, as I expect we will conclude that the exercise was futile and it was wasted. And that would be the wrong conclusion, I think, to draw. And I want to close by talking about 2 reasons that fossil fuel, besides the sunk cost thing, that I think fossil fuels are so sticky and so persistent. And they have to do with transmission and with storage, right? So on the transmission side, the advantage of fossil fuels is that you can bring them relatively conveniently to a place near the electricity demand and burn them there and have relatively short wires. You can't do that with wind and solar. You have to generate the wind and solar electricity where it makes sense to generate it, given where the sun shines and where the wind blows. And that might be quite far from population centers, right? And this is a problem that, that Jose Ignacio faces in Chile. There's a long distance between the optimal places to generate wind in the south and solar in the north, and the population centers in the middle. And but we're familiar with this in Massachusetts too, because there's, to our north in Canada, there's enormous hydroelectric potential, cheap, carbon-free, and all we need is a wire to bring it to us. Our neighbors in the state of Maine, which used to be part of Massachusetts, and maybe we'd be better off if it still were, are quite...
Not sure they will love that.
Pardon me?
Not sure they will love that.
Well, I'm not sure they would either, but you know, Harvard once tried to buy MIT too. That was in the 19th century. In any case, with the federal system and with the international border between Canada and the United States, the problem of constructing transmission lines is even more pronounced in North America than it is in Chile. Yeah. And that constrains our ability here and Chile's ability in the south to generate electricity using wind and solar. The wind and solar, the fraction of time that the wind and solar turbines are operating in Chile is only half of what they're technologically capable of, as I understand it. And it's partly because of these transmission problems. The other way you could solve that problem, obviously, is with storage. But storage is, for now, expensive. I know that lots of scientific geniuses at MIT and also at Harvard and in Chile are working to bring it down. But we still have an institutional design problem because we expect that we won't be using that storage capacity very often. Maybe once, maybe for a few hours a day, maybe even for a few days a year, but it still has to be built. Nobody builds a hotel with the idea that they're going to use it only on New Year's Eve, right? But we're sort of in that position with respect to electricity storage, and we need institutional innovations to solve that problem so that we create the incentive for for private investment in storage capacity. So there's a lot to talk about. I'm super looking forward to these next three presentations. I'm going to be quiet now and get out of the way so that these people can tell you what they know. So thank you, Christian, for the opportunity.
Definitely. Thank you. Thank you. I think the idea of buying MIT is actually brilliant. I hadn't heard it, but definitely looking to follow up on that. But let's get back to energy. And maybe since you've mentioned also a lot of the policy here in Massachusetts, maybe we could go to Galen next. Sure. And just, you know, you can tell us a little bit of what's, you know, the challenges that Mass is confronting at the moment. Sure. In terms of renewals.
Buen dia. Hearing the Spanish at the beginning led me back to my time recently in Bariloche. And the anxiety I felt trying to order cerveza y café, but also mesmerized by the beauty of the language. So thank you for those two experiences simultaneously. It's wonderful to be here. I am Galen Nelson. I'm the Chief Program Officer at the Mass Clean Energy Center. We are the state's clean energy economic development authority. And we're focused on supporting climate solution innovation, but we're also equally focused on helping the Commonwealth, the state of Massachusetts, achieve its very ambitious climate targets. We have, I would say, a relatively straightforward formula for our approach to this work. And I was just thinking the other day about how to simplify this, and I think I've actually reduced it to a formula, which is R, D, D, and D, which is, I think, a term that many of you may know, plus EI plus W times E times I. So I'll explain what that is. Research and development, I think that's certainly a term that all of you are likely familiar with. We do a lot of that, focused on climate. The other Ds, demonstration and deployment, supporting later stage commercialization acceleration of the climate solution technologies that we support. EI is equity investment, so we do have an equity investment arm at the Mass Clean Energy Center, which is somewhat unique among state clean energy economic development authorities. The W stands for workforce, so we make sizable investments in preparing the existing workforce and also developing a pipeline of workers that we know will be necessary to achieve our climate objectives. And then times E and I, which is equity and innovation. And equity is important, I think, for at least two reasons. One, there is certainly a moral imperative to make sure that the energy transition, that everyone is included in the energy transition and that is affordable and equitable for all citizens of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. But there's also a very practical consideration, which is that we simply cannot meet our climate objectives unless nearly every citizen and every business is part of this transition. So that has been a major focus for us. And then with regard to innovation, I would say that that transcends all of our work. And I think when we think about innovation, I think most generally tend to think first about technology innovation, and that's certainly something that we support through a variety of programs. But we also support business model innovation, which is, I think in some ways almost more important than the technology innovation itself. And then innovation in our programs, in our organizational design. So we're very proud of the, I think, innovative program designs that we've supported at the Mass Clean Energy Center over the last decade or so of our existence. Some very basics. A number of people usually ask how we're funded. We are funded with ratepayer dollars, so there's a small surcharge on most electric bills in the state of, not all, but most electricity ratepayers. And that amounts to about $1 or so a month for the typical household, a bit more for commercial accounts. And that funding comes to us. It amounts to about $21 million annually. And then there's also a trust, a renewable energy trust that was created by the legislature over a decade ago. And we've been drawing from that over the last decade. So just quickly running through that formula, with regard to the research, that's included everything from looking at how do we need to deploy energy storage. We've launched a study, State of Charge, several years ago, looking at how should the state structure policy, how should we support energy storage technologies, how should we catalyze the market, and in the end, we launched a series of energy storage demonstration projects, utility scale energy storage demonstration projects, not necessarily to demonstrate energy storage technology, but to demonstrate and deploy energy storage business models. More recently, we've, again, just a couple of examples, more recently we've are in the midst of a study looking at distribution system planning. So how do we optimize the grid that we'll need, the electricity grid that we'll need to electrify nearly all end uses, building electrification, vehicle electrification, and do that in a costly manner over the next 30 or so years. With regard to development, the D and R&D, as I noted, we have a suite of technology development programs that are specifically tailored to meet or fill financing gaps that we've identified. So where the private sector does not want to play or doesn't participate in a way that we believe is rigorous enough, we step in with competitive grant programs to support early stage companies. As far as the demonstration piece is concerned, this relates to the pilot projects that we support to help catalyze and crowd in private investment and launch markets, whether those be energy storage pilot projects or electric bike pilot projects, or efforts to identify the most cost-effective ways to retrofit our very old building stock in what is, I think many of you may know, quite a cold climate here through a good part of the year. So those are some examples of some of the pilot projects that we support. On the deployment side, the amount of deployment work that we've done over the last 8 years has varied somewhat dramatically, but more recently we just closed out a solar loan program. So we provided private lenders across the state with a loan loss reserve and other credit support that enabled them to initiate over 6,000 loans for solar array systems on private homes. And we've also helped launch the state's heat pump market, critical to our building electrification and decarbonization efforts, with very early stage incentives. And now we've been able to pull back from that effort as the market took off on its own. So again, playing a role to catalyze those markets. With regard to our investments division, again, this is about wanting to crowd in private investment, attract other equity investors to the table. We often lead investment rounds. We're not looking to replicate or take the place of private investors, but we also know that hard tech or deep tech, whatever term you prefer, requires long-term patient investors, and it's often very important for the public sector to step in alongside our partners in the private sector and make those strategic early investments in particularly in companies that are developing what we consider to be critical climate solution technologies. I think I do have some other slides. I mean, really just 3, but might be good to move ahead if possible. I think you might have skipped over one.
You have a clicker?
Oh, that's great. That's great.
I'll take it. You tell me.
Okay. So I'm going to turn here because I didn't memorize these, but I thought it would be interesting to quickly run through a couple of energy transition axioms or universal truths, as I like to think of them. These are not MassCEC's official universal energy transition universal truths, but I often wonder to what extent these are broadly shared. So we need climate solution innovation and deployment, and with regard to innovation, we need both disruptive and incremental innovation. And I suspect that view is broadly shared, but there's often a somewhat, I think, silly debate in this country about whether we should be investing more in deployment or innovation, and of course the answer is both. And innovation provides a number of benefits, including cost reductions of the type that Forrest referenced, as well as performance improvements, and that helps accelerate adoption of those critical clean energy technologies. We have an enormous workforce challenge ahead of us. Of course, we have a very tight labor market right now, nationally, and here in the state of Massachusetts, and in addition to that, a need to attract and train many, many new workers, particularly electricians, but in other occupations as well, to electrify our economy. Climate solution innovation and technology is evolving faster than regulatory frameworks. This, I think, has been a long-standing challenge for us, but it's very difficult to create an environment where markets can grow, and in some cases even where we can move rapidly on critical demonstration projects when regulatory frameworks often lag behind. Finance and construction, two industries key to the energy transition, are notoriously cautious and conservative and slow to change, and those are fairly specific examples, but I think do complicate our efforts with regard to the energy transition here in Massachusetts, and again, I suspect those challenges are broadly shared. I think the system optimization piece is interesting. If you think about what the energy system, particularly on the electricity side, used to look like, there were a handful of large generators feeding a very large number of end uses and load centers, and now, of course, you have distributed generation. You have a wide variety of mix of existing renewable and fossil-based generation sources. You have energy storage. You have emerging fuels such as hydrogen. How to best optimize and invest and integrate all of those, I think, is a very, very difficult challenge for policymakers. And then finally, the last piece, I think, gets to the need for more sophisticated community engagement and social innovation, I would say, around this need to activate and mobilize a much larger swath of the population, including home and business owners, because we really have burned through the early adopters, and we really need to mobilize the fast followers or the early majority with regard to the market adoption curve if we're to deploy the amount of clean energy that is necessary to meet our goals, both here in Massachusetts and internationally. So again, just some observations that perhaps may be relevant to the rest of this discussion, and would love to hear whether or not these are shared in Chile. And finally, the last slide here, just very quickly, this is a bit of an eye chart, but I think it's a way to illustrate how we believe we play a role, which is to say that we try to fill those gaps, the technology valley of death, the commercialization valley of death, with strategic investment. So where the private sector tends not to play, and where we see a shortfall in both grant support and investment support, we step in with competitive strategic investments to help Massachusetts companies in their race toward commercialization. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jose Ignacio, we've heard basically from world-class strategy and really industrial policy from states such as Massachusetts, which it's known to be leading the way not only in the U.S. but also globally in terms of the right policies, in terms of pushing renewable energy and the decarbonization. It's really it's very welcome to hear that an expert basically in renewables. You've developed all your career on renewables, and now you're the CEO of one of the largest upstream companies in Chile, which I think is very telling of the kind of the kind of future that the industry is also envisioning for the energy sector in Chile. So maybe you can tell us a little bit. We've heard from Massachusetts. How do you see it in Chile, both with your Colbún hat, but also with your former Acera hat and others. The Chilean reality, and dive from there.
Can I go there with the presentation?
Absolutely, absolutely, please.
Okay. There it is. Okay, well, thank you for ChileMass and the invitation, and the MIT and Harvard. To be honest, I feel a bit shy of talking about innovation on energy and technology here. You should be teaching me, and I should be sitting there, But anyway, I will try to tell a bit what a small utility in Chile, the only Chilean utility in Chile in the electrical sector is trying to do, to basically find an equilibrium, more or less what you have mentioned, because this is not about technology, it's not about only economical, it's also about social and environmental. And I think the table has 4 feet, and you had to find, each country probably, each company has to find its own equilibrium on how to deal with those 4 very important pillars in order to achieve sustainable development and to foster and accelerate the energy transition in Chile and in all the world. It's very important to have those always in mind. So basically, the Chilean context, as it was mentioned, the reduction in capex and the social pressure to accelerate decarbonization in Chile has been extremely high and extremely politicized. And there you see the evolution. It's very impressive. We have a law in Chile that was basically forcing to have 20% of renewable energy by 2025. That goal was achieved 5 years earlier in 2020. This year probably we're going to hit almost the 30% mark, and probably by 2030 we are going to hit the 60% mark. If you add on that the 60%, not including hydro, which Colbún has a lot of hydro. So if you add the non-conventional renewable sources plus the hydro by 2030, we'll probably be the 80–90% mark, which is kind of, but that's not going to be easy. This first 20% was the easy one, probably. Now we are dealing with a lot of social tension because of the use of territory. Just to have some numbers in order to get to 2030 and shutting out the coal plants, which is kind of a voluntary target still. There's a law in discussion at the moment, but currently it's voluntary. You need to put almost 70% of that capacity in the territory. And it's a lot of territory that the renewables need, including transmission, storage, and many other things that are needed. So the rationale behind this is not easy. It's not easy to solve. We are badly used in the couple of decades to do short laws and think only in short term. And in fact, the electrical regulatory framework, which was written in 1981, has been modified several times only with short laws, thinking in short term. And we don't want any more short laws. We want long laws, that are looking long term. And unfortunately, we haven't been able to start that long-term discussion for the electrical sector. So this regulatory framework is sort of, full of bits and pieces, trying to accommodate to these new technologies and to the new way that this technology should be deployed in the system. So what are the drivers that are fostering, are pushing this? First of all, decarbonization. Probably we all agree here that we need to get rid of fossil fuels as soon as possible. I think that's, but we need to do it sensibly, with a technical, economical, social, and environmental perspective. Power plant closures, we had an agreement to shut down coal plants by 2014 on a voluntary basis, but today the politicians are discussing to enforce it by law by 2030. Initially it was 2025. And when I was in the Renewable Energy Association as president, we were the ones that told the government, easy, easy. We would love to shut it by 2025, but is there any analysis, a technical analysis on security of supply or prices that we can do it on 2025? No, but it's look good, you know. we like to end things in 5 or 0, right? So we ran a study for 2 years in Acera with the help of Universidad de Chile and you know, the brightest minds that we could find in Chile on the electrical sector, and it was impossible. You know, we were the Renewable Energy Association saying we can't shut down 2025, and we kind of got into an agreement that 2030, you know, maybe if we had the right conditions that I think we have still not met in the system. Then the social environmental context, we are in a social transformation in Chile. We are writing a new constitution, and that has made a lot of tension in the society on how well we're dealing with territory, with water, environment, cities, city development, mining industry, and of course that has a lot of impact on how energy is going to contribute to this new social agreement that we are dealing with in Chile. Yesterday we had a very nice discussion on that in the Constitution. So it's a lot of uncertainty at the moment. You know, we don't know actually how it's going to look like the new Constitution, how energy and environment is going to be dealt with in the future. And of course, local pollution. And local pollution is probably sort of the white elephant in every discussion. We are always talking about, you know, CO2 emissions and climate change, which is very important. But we have a lot of local issues on energy supply, local issues with wood firing. Probably, I don't know, the ones who don't know, the second primary fuel used in Chile after oil is wood. The second primary energy use is wood. And if you go to Chile in winter, to any city, you know, just kind of breathe because of the amount of wood that's burned for heating. And nobody has been able to tackle that and solve it. And we can have a 100% renewable system, but we'll still be burning wood. We will not solve the local pollution issues. That's a big issue. Carbon neutrality, I think this is a very good thing. Chile committed to be carbon neutral by 2050. Current government is discussing maybe to push it to 2040. So this is also triggering a lot of industries and a lot of movement for this energy transition. And that, of course, energy sector plays a key role. You know, 60% of the contribution of that carbon neutrality will come from the energy sector, because the energy sector and the electrification of the other industries like transport, like mining, is putting a lot of push on more energy, you know, clean energy, sustainable energy, cheap energy, in order to other industries also decarbonize. And of course, the natural endowment. Chile has no fossil resources, which I think is great for us. We have very good natural resources far away from the consumption points, which creates a lot of challenges on transmission and storage. But I think what used to be sort of a big headache, not having fossil fuels, is becoming now sort of a real challenging position for becoming a leader. Many countries' neighbors have a lot of fossil fuels, and they're sort of struggling of what to do with their fossil fuels because they create a lot of economic development, but you know, they're slowing down the decarbonization. Well, we don't have that problem. We just don't have any fossil fuels, and we just have to try to rely on our own natural resources. So, you know, what are the disruptions that we have seen that are sort of putting a question mark on how are we going to achieve that 60% that I showed at the beginning? First of all, transmission. You know, where we're going to put those lines in order to put 20, 30 gigawatts of additional capacity in order to achieve decarbonization and replace that energy, that fossil fuel-based energy with renewable energy. You know, Professor Reinhardt mentioned, you know, building a new line, it's really complicated. You know? In Chile, it takes between 7 to 10 years to build a new line, and it takes between 2 to 3 years to build a new power plant. You know, so always the lines are going behind new generation. You know, so smart grids, trying to use as much as possible the existing infrastructure, trying to get generation as close as possible to demand, distributed generation, etc. It's becoming a real challenge in Chile. Hydrology, you know, we used to be 55–60% of our generation coming from a run-of-river or dam hydros, but that now currently is 30–35%. So hydrology is not giving us some air, and unfortunately, the 25–30% of current non-conventional renewable capacity has not been able to replace fossil fuels, but has been replacing the hydrology that we didn't have. So we are still firing more than 50% of generation with coal and gas, and the renewables are filling the space that hydrology, left behind these past years. This year was an exception. This year was very, very wet after 15 years of drought. But it's becoming very hard to predict, and we were discussing these past days with the MIT on how we could have some help from the MIT of trying to find models, with Horacio here and his team, on how to deal with trying to see how weather and particular hydrology will behave in the long term. Are we going to have 15 more years of drought? We don't know. Fuel prices, of course, I don't think I have to mention that. The international crisis of fuels, it's very complicated, and it's leading us to a lot of issues in Chile, because we just have to rely on imported fuels, and we are just a price taker. We just have any power of trying to fix prices, so we just take whatever we can. And thermal generation, all those, all three issues have led that, incredibly, we have been trying to shut down coal plants, for example, but the replacement of that energy has not become from renewable sources, has become from diesel plants. So the wanted objective of decarbonization and reducing pricing and contamination has been totally on the contrary. We are replacing coal with diesel plants that are more expensive and more contaminating. Yeah? It just happened in the Concepcion area that a big coal plant was shut down, and a week later, a report was managed by the Energy Commission saying that energy was not able, that renewable production was not able to cope with that demand, and it had to be replaced with diesel plants in the area. So again, wrong planification. I don't think we have the methodology, the instruments, the data analysis, and the modeling enough in order to support this transition, as sensible as possible with this equilibrium that I mentioned before. So basically, the main concern in Chile is that we want to accelerate decarbonization, we want to accelerate energy transition, while at the same time, of course, maintaining the security, the safety, and the economic standards that people need in order to have cheap, sustainable energy. And also, we need the social and the territorial support of that. Yeah. And yesterday in the Smart Cities presentation, the part of the socialization of all of this is very important, and in Chile, it's super important. We have a very fragile territory, and if just the technicians want to solve this without any consultation, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. So, well, this is what we mentioned. This is more or less in numbers what Acera concluded in its study on how can we replace fuels, fossil fuels, mainly coal, by 2030. And there you see the amount of technologies, including batteries, wind, solar, some CSP, some geothermal, in order to cope with that energy that's going to be taken out from the system. It's a big challenge. I think for the moment we more or less have 10 gigawatts of those 22 with certainty. So we still have the way to go just to take out coal. I haven't even mentioned taking out gas or oil of the system. That's going to probably be another study that will require 20, 30, 40 gigawatts of additional capacity between 2030 and 2040. And the amount of territory, and again, and lines and storage that will be needed, it's pretty incredible. Just for a small country like Chile, imagine you want to do that in the US, So, well, we spoke on that. What are the technologies that definitely need to be fostered and enhanced? And I'm very glad of the meetings that we had this week. Many bright people are working on transmission technologies, on demand technologies, on new regulation, new frameworks. We have to be really innovative, not only on the technological side, but also very innovative on the regulatory side. How is the regulation catching up with these technologies? How do we generate, community involvement? If you go to a community, they are pretty clear that they want clean energy, cheap energy, and they want to power up, the internet, electric vehicles in any community. But they don't want the generation for the power plants. The NIMBYs, the bananas, all these acronyms that we use, are really, really, really sort of pushing back on this new investment. And also as companies, really take the being net positive, not even net neutral, net positive from all its aspects. It's becoming a must to have, a really requirement of society that companies go much more deep involvement, in the territories where they're, developing their projects and they're generating positive. So kind of you get a protection around your projects, and people feel really that it's a good news to have these projects on their territory, and it's not just another power plant bringing up new issues, new problems, etc. So in that way, how are we dealing with all this pressure, this tension, all these requirements from society? First of all, we had to sit down, and just as Professor, did a paper on us 10 years ago, we had really we had really thought and put a lot of effort on going deeper into what Professor Reinhardt highlights 10 years ago, and really enhance all the areas that we thought were critical in order to help us achieving our goals of installing 4 gigawatts of new renewables by 2030, which is basically doubling the capacity that Colbún has in the country, which is, 4 gigawatts may not sound that much, but for Chile and for us, it's a huge challenge. It's more than we have done in 36 years. We want to do it in 7. And in order to do that, basically we had defined these as our key areas, and innovation is playing now a really important strategy. And not only innovation in technology, but really innovation in the way we deal with communities, in the way we are supporting the regulatory changes needed for that, innovation in the way our existing assets are trying to sort of have a new language in terms of their community engagement, and how they support also the energy transition. So basically we are working on, of course, trying to find a way for green hydrogen. Not easy, it's still expensive, but we are definitely thinking that hydrogen will play a big role in the decarbonization of the sector. Water desalination, Chile has an extreme water issue. We are getting drier every day. Our Atacama Desert grows like 100 meters per year, south. So, we are getting drier every year. So we are working very heavily on desalination, and also trying to build sustainable solutions for our clients. Our customers want the help to help them in order to decarbonize their own processes. So what are we basically now offering? Just not only the energy, but also the management of the energy. We want our clients to consume less megawatt hours and not more. They need to be more efficient. They need to reduce their carbon footprint. And that goes a lot of areas, distributed energy, electrical efficient buildings, that was mentioned yesterday also as a very important part, storage, electrical vehicles, of course, and also monitoring all these, and so to have some retrofitting. And why all that? Because we need to implement radical and rapid changes and rapid solutions to us and to our clients and to society, in order basically to create really an engagement with our clients and with our community, to basically allowing our strategic objectives of putting these 4 gigawatts of sustainable energy viable. And for that, just not, as Bill Gates said there, it's not just an approach on the technology side, it's also innovation on the social, on supply chains, on markets, on our suppliers, on our clients, etc. We have to all be part of this transition. This is not just a quest for generators or a quest for transport companies. Everybody has to play a part on this game. And just a small highlight on how we're going to put social innovation at a center. We are doing many things. We were the first company in Chile and one of the first in LATAM to start putting desalination plants in the makeup water that we use for our gas plants. And that has achieved us to reduce 60% of the water consumption in very critical water areas in Chile, like Quillota or in Concepcion. And now we are building a second osmosis plant to reuse the rejected water of the desalination plant, and that will achieve an 80% of reduction in water consumption. Also, we have built in our water reservoirs parks, protected areas. So basically, we are trying to transform a power plant into a park that has a power plant. Not a power plant with a park, but a park with a power plant. And that has really changed the life of the people around, you know. So they don't see us anymore as the company that, you know, put a dam, you know, and flooded the area. No, we have now a national park with protected areas for tourism, and we have developed also small local companies to basically facilitate services, restaurants, you know, there you see canoes, administering the beach, etc. And that has really totally changed, you know, the way community is seeing us with our current dam power plants. We are building also developing new technologies, for example, for cleaning systems and for panels, pyrometers, etc. Trying to put automations, because these power plants usually are located in the desert. It's very hard to access, you know, a lot of issues with transport, of getting there. So basically, automation and technology in solar power plants is something that we are trying to do. For example, in the osmosis plants that we are building for the gas plants, once the membranes are used, and instead of just, you know, throwing them as waste, we are doing some innovation there to reuse them and put some systems to clean the water for communities, faraway communities, you know. And many other things, you know, reusing, you know, for example, the clothes that people use, the parkas and all the things for the cold. We take them, we reuse them, and we use the insulation to build insulation materials for new buildings, for communities. You know, and many other things that I think are going into the way of social innovation at the center of our business, in order to have sort of a protection for the projects, for the society, and they see us as really, you know, making the community participating in this energy transition. So just to sum up, accelerated energy transition needs innovation at the technological, community, social, and environmental side. We have to work together with the people at the center, in order to make this happen. It's very challenging, but I think companies have to play a key role on this transition, and basically be part of, you know, a community around the energy transition, with authorities, the political system, private sector, civil society, and basically everyone that needs to play a role on this transition. So thank you very much. There are some of the works that we have had this year on these issues, and thank you for the time and the opportunity to present here. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much. You may have in your timings that this panel is ending around 10:30. We've adjusted things, so we're going to finalize closer to 11, so no worries. There'll be a little bit of time for questions and discussion. So let's go a little bit from you know, what I mean, fantastic overview in Chile, and very honest on the challenges. It's great. And then, you know, going through what the larger company is trying to do, and let's go to a little bit of the technology side and most of the micro. I mean, most of the things that you've mentioned. Jose Ignacio also, they really need solutions in terms of storage. And of course, Felipe is going to bring us the example of how can we improve that side with, you know, what you guys are doing on lithium. So if you could take the floor.
Well, thank you very much, and I want to thank ChileMass for the invitation. And to be honest, I am very honored to be in this panel with you. So, and I will try to keep the presentation short, because I know that we are a little bit late, so we can have some time for a conversation. So, as you know, like, the world is moving to electromobility. Most of the major automakers have done very high goals to become 100% of the vehicles, 80% of the vehicles, or 50% of the vehicles for the next decade. And that means a lot of challenge for the whole world. So, as you know, gasoline has already peaked, and all the automakers are going to the electric vehicles. And lithium is the new gasoline. So there is a lot of development of new batteries, but all of them has lithium. And if you think in a world with 100% of the electric vehicles with batteries, we need to ramp up the production 30 times. And this is complex, because you can find lithium in brine under the salars, and you can find lithium in rock. Around 70% or 75% of the resources around the world are on the brine. But currently, around 80% of the production is coming from rock. The rock industry has a lot of the environmental problem that we know from rock industry. There is a lot of development and new technologies. But the truth is that if we want to get this 30 times production of lithium, we have to go to the lithium that is in brine. And get lithium from brine is not easy. Each brine, if you go to any of the salars that you can find in South America, each of the salars have totally different kind of brine. The chemistry is totally different. Some of them has a lot of magnesium, other ones has a lot of boron, some of them has a lot of lithium, another one are not too much lithium. So the truth is that it's not only a situation that we can or we need to produce from brine, but it's also it's not easy to do it. And the truth is that right now, the only way to extract lithium from brine is using evaporation ponds. And basically what is evaporation pond? You pump out brine, you put it in a huge plastic swimming pool, and you wait 1-2 years to get the sun, do it work and evaporate all the water that you have. And then you can get, in the best scenario, around 45% of the lithium. All of the other lithium is lost in the process. And at the end, you get like big mountains of waste, other minerals that you cannot use and are not commercial. So this is right now how we are producing lithium in the triangle of lithium. That is what we have in the north of Chile, north of Argentina, and Bolivia. And also there is a lot of problem with the environment, because as you may imagine, if you deploy all the brine, it can affect freshwater reservoirs. So what is Lilac doing? We have developed our own technology. Lilac was founded around 5 years ago, and we are one of the DLE companies that are trying to change the world. DLE means direct lithium extraction, and our process is 10,000 times faster, so we don't have to wait 2 years of evaporation ponds. Our process lasts no more than 2 hours. We can get 1,000 times smaller footprint, because if you need these huge evaporation ponds, you need a lot of footprint in the place of the extraction. And because our technology is modular, we need a very, very, very small area to deploy our technology. And also, with our technology, we can get up to 90% of the lithium, so we can multiply for 2 or 3 times the production of current producer of evaporation ponds. We have a proven technology. We have the biggest or largest brine library in the world. We have more than 60 brine from different salars around the world, from geothermal projects, and even from oil and gas deployment brine. We have engaged in several projects. Right now, we have done a pilot plant here in the US. We are commissioning a second plant in Argentina, and during the last part of this year and next year, we are deploying 3 other pilot plants in South America. And from a technical point of view, we have done already 2 pre-feasibility studies. We are doing 4 more, and we are finishing our first DFS, that is the final step before to go and build the first DLE commercial plant in the world. And we have a really good investment portfolio. You can see some of them: BMW, SK, one of the biggest producers of batteries, Sumitomo, lower carbon. We have our, as part of our early investor was Breakthrough Energy Ventures, that is founded by Bill Gates. The Engine, that is venture capital related with the MIT. And we have been chosen in the last 2 years of one of the 100 tech clean startup to watch around the world. So basically, this is the main difference. So the ponds, you can see there are some ponds that we can find in South America. The other picture is our pilot plant. So as you can see, the footprint is completely different. With ponds, you need a very specific brine chemistry. So you need high concentration of lithium, and you need that the ratio between some of the impurities, specifically magnesium to lithium, cannot be higher than 20. Our pilot plant in United States, we extract lithium from a brine that the ratio was 200 to 1. So with Lilac, you can go to almost every brine resource and extract lithium. To do pilot plant with evaporation ponds and then the commercial plant with evaporation pond, you need to wait 2 years to know if what you are doing is right, and then you have to still like tuning all the ponds. With Lilac, in 3 years, you can have a commercial project running. And as I told you, the recovery with evaporation ponds are around 45 or even less. And with our technology, we are expecting around 90%. And the product quality, because the evaporation pond, you have a lot of impurities, you are dealing all the time with final impurities in the lithium product that you have to send to battery makers. Because we are extracting just the lithium, the quality and the purity of our final project is really high and can go directly without polish second stage to the battery makers. So I don't want to go to everything that is right in there, but basically what we do is we put the brine in a big tank with little bits, little balls that we have developed and that we built in-house, and there is a chemical reaction. So when these balls touch the brine, the ball take the ion of lithium of the brine, and after 1 hour, 1 hour and a half, you can get the lithium out of this system with exactly same pH and chemistry of the original brine, so you can re-inject in the salar, keeping all the environmental concern taking care of that. And then you wash the bits and you get this concentration of lithium that you can go directly to a battery maker. This is a little bit of what we are doing. So as I told you, 70% of the resource of lithium around the world are in the salar in South America. So you can imagine we are an American company with the R&D, headquarters, everything in Oakland, California. We are starting to build a manufacturing in Nevada, but probably 90% or more of our project will be in South America. So this is very interesting because this bridge between what we are talking now, Massachusetts and Chile, or in our case, California and Chile, is very important. And I think we have a lot of opportunities from a South American Chilean point of view to work with this new technology developed in the United States. And I think there is a lot of companies developed in the United States that really need the capability that we have in South America, not only the natural resources, but also the people. So finally, just to give a couple of ideas, the lithium triangle is needed for the energy transition and to get the dream of have 100% of the electric vehicles adoption. The new technology and adoption for the green mining, I will say that the mining, sadly, have been one of the industries that have adopted new technologies at a slower path. So I think there is a real opportunity. There is also green hydrogen, and there is a lot of regulation and public policies in Chile that are pushing in that direction. And also in South America and Chile, you can find a lot of rare earth and other mineral opportunities that I think is very interesting for this conference. The strategic mineral and resources, United States is taking a lot of care of what the strategy policies they are developing. So right now there is a Department of Energy grant for a strategic project. There are state and federal funds and a lot of support. And there is a lot of clean tech investment funds like Breakthrough Energy Ventures that are looking to do things in places like Chile and South America. And there are some like opportunities quite basic, but easy to pilot new technologies. South America is easy to pilot new technology, and specifically Chile. The language and culture is, if you jump to Chile, it's easy to jump to another places in South America. And finally, a very simple thing, but time zones. You know, I work a lot with people in Australia and Europe, and thanks God, our headquarters are in California, so we can be connected basically the whole day. And finally, there are two pictures. The ESG part of our company is fundamental. So the first one is with one of the communities that we are working. We are not visualizing the EV transition if we are not working with the communities and with the people that are around the resources. And the second one is the Pachamama, as we call in South America, that is the Mother Earth, that if we don't take care of them, future mining project and the electrification is not a real possibility. Everyone wants to drive a Tesla or an electric vehicle, but they don't want to do it from a lithium that is contaminating, from a rock industry, or from projects that we are affecting the environment in South America. So thank you very much. I'm sorry I extended a little bit.
Okay, we're going to wrap up exactly at 11, so we have 15 minutes for a round of questions. I have a number of questions, but I'm not going to ask any because I would like to give the public the opportunity. Please, if you could quickly identify yourself, ask a brief question that finishes with a question mark, and shoot away, please. So, sir, go ahead. Got it.
Versus capacity, because
Got
I
it.
think that's the real number. That's
Okay.
the first data question.
Mhm.
And the second question is basically, given that solar and wind, by definition, only have a unstable generation and can only generate for a certain amount of time during the days. Hydroelectric, there's very strong resistance in Chile, at least, even for run-of-the-river building of new capacity.
Yep.
Nuclear is very resistant. So my question is, how far away are we from having really solid and robust storage capacity through gigantic batteries to be able to store this
Got it.
power generated by wind and by solar just in fractions of the day? And last, which may be an uncomfortable question, but I'd like to make it, is it efficient just to not generate expectations that will never be met? Is it efficient to really eliminate all fossil capacity and generate a high level of uncertainty to the whole system? Or are we going to have to be realistic and in the long term maintain some level of fossil capacity in order to have
Understood.
a stable system?
Got it. Thank you very much. Let me pick up. So let me try to pick up one or two more, and then we'll just leave it with the panelists. Is there anyone? Yuli Fuentes. You were like, yes. Tell me. Short. Uh-huh.
One question. I hear Massachusetts building this capacity, and I hear Chile building this capacity. How can we collaborate more? That's the question.
Okay, that's directly for you. I'll take maybe, yeah, please.
Yeah, so in line with aligning internationally and having synergies around certainly desalination and maybe for examples in Massachusetts or Singapore or Israel, do you guys have a fund where you're investing directly into companies that would be able to work internally inside when you're deploying these initiatives? And then for Lilac, on your map, it was very interesting where you guys are exploring. Are you doing any work with other international
Eduardo. Yeah. Okay, maybe let's start with that, see if we have a little bit more time. Forrest, would you like to start with some reflections, or?
Let's let Jose,
Okay.
go first since
Fantastic.
any of the questions.
Fantastic. Let's do it.
Well, first on the numbers, the numbers that I showed, it's on energy, not on capacity. So we are now close to 30% of energy production in terms of non-conventional. So capacity is around 14 gigawatts. So capacity is like 45%, but on energy, because of the capacity factors, it's around 32. So it's all on energy. And I agree, it's not the same because base load against variable technologies, it's hard to compare. So what we have been doing in Acera here is trying to compare, for example, when solar PV with batteries is going to have an LCOE of the whole system comparable to coal or gas. That's more or less the metrics that we try to use, because exactly that's the problem. It's not the same to put a green electron that you don't know when it's going to be in the system, rather than to have base load generation. So now the capex increase in batteries and in wind and solar, it's kind of a bit tricky, but projections, and we hope to recover the trend of reducing. We think that between 27 or 2030, we will have an LCOE of a wind or solar facility with batteries able to compete on a dollar per megawatt hour basis with a coal or gas. Now, honestly, to be saying, with the current gas and coal prices, that probably maybe even before of that. But yeah, there will be a point that you will be able to shut down coal and gas with batteries if they are built sustainable, and then probably within the end of this decade.
Oh. Okay. Felipe, maybe if you want to take, there was one particular to you, I think.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we have been working with other companies or institutions, and I will say that the more official one is a new coalition that we have created here to influence in public policy around strategy, minerals, and especially how the things can be done internally in US, but also with fund to invest in other parts of the world. So yeah, we are working on that. We are a technology company. We have a different family of patents and IP, so also we are quite cautious about what is our technology doing, because it's our asset, but we are working with other institutions and companies to try to push the things and move forward.
Fantastic. Yellen, I think there were two questions addressed to you in terms of collaboration and if the fund was invested directly into companies.
Yes. So I think on the collaboration question, if I could point to, I would say, two concrete examples. One is that there are certainly innovators here in Massachusetts that have technologies that are relevant here for our energy challenges, but also relevant broader domestically and internationally. And so we'd love to export that. And now hearing this wonderfully inspiring story of Lilac, and certainly this is not the first time aware of innovators in Chile that are developing technologies that are applicable here. So I think to the extent that we can explore demonstration project opportunities across international borders that make sense for all parties, that's a real concrete opportunity. I think the other is around this concept of community engagement and social innovation, which is that even with the flood of financing from the Inflation Reduction Act, from state incentives, the private investment sitting on the sidelines, ESG focused, wanting to get in the game, we're going to continue to face renewable energy siting challenges, from transmission to large PV systems to offshore wind and beyond. And we need to get much smarter about how to engage, first of all, make populations aware of the benefits of clean energy, the necessity of the energy challenge and transition, and be much more creative and innovative in the way that we engage communities around renewable energy project deployment. So I think those are two areas where we could collaborate.
Forrest, please.
Yeah, so one of the things that emerged over and over again in this conversation was that innovation, if you define it narrowly as just the invention of new machines or new technologies, isn't going to be enough, right? It has to be complemented by institutional change, which will enable the innovation and create the economic climate in which the technologies can deliver their benefits to society. And so Jose Ignacio had a quote from Bill Gates about how innovation isn't just inventing new machines, it's inventing new ways of thinking about the world. And I think that's, in part, an answer to your question about whether we're overpromising. We are absolutely overpromising if we're going to rely on the engineers to solve this problem, we're overpromising because we need institutional change as well. With particular respect to the green hydrogen, my understanding of hydrogen is that it's a carrier device, right? So it's a way of exporting the solar and wind capabilities of Chile or of some other place where it's relatively inexpensive to generate green electricity. It will only work in the context of an open international trading architecture, right? And that's why the national security thing is so important, because if nations turn in on themselves and think, well, I'm going to solve my energy security problems through autarky, through self-sufficiency, then we'll leave these gains on the table. And presumably you were talking about the same thing when you were talking about food yesterday down the river, right? It's if we don't maintain the openness of the trading system and we rely on individual countries or even states trying to solve their own problems, it will forego so many gains from trade that we will impoverish ourselves and conclude that we can't afford the environmental benefits that we should aspire to get.
But yeah, I was going to ask you maybe, Jose Ignacio, you can tell us just directly also specifically on the question on where are we in Chile, right? Because we just passed the new policy, so maybe just comment on green hydrogen specifically to address Eduardo's.
Yeah, there was also a question on desalination. I think desalination is one of the top 3 tension points in Chile, how are we going to deal with water. So definitely, not only Colbún, but I think we are all trying to find new technologies to desalinate cheaper, faster, with less energy consumption. And I'm sure some of the bright minds here will be looking at technologies, and we will certainly be trying to test them in Chile or do some piloting on new ways to desalinate and produce energy produce water from different sources. And regarding green hydrogen, I'm optimistic. I think not all consumption can be electrified. There will be some usage of liquid fuels, definite for sure. So I agree that fuels are going to be needed, but maybe not fossil fuels. Probably hydrogen will start taking a place in many areas: aviation, sea transport, industrial processes that need heating, need heat. And definitely technology will surprise us, as always. I was recently with some guys from GE. They are currently testing gas turbines that are able to be as efficient as a conventional gas, open cycle gas, using 50% hydrogen, with very few changes in the technologies. So probably we'll be having 100% hydrogen-fired gas plants in the future, pretty close by. And that will make us, for example, use the existing piping, the piping infrastructure, which is huge in the world, not just to pipe and move gas, but move hydrogen. There are some challenges, because hydrogen is much volatile and other things, but that's a technology problem that's going to be solved for sure. So I think hydrogen will be used at all levels. Probably another good thing is that it's very easy to produce hydrogen. You can have an electrolyzer in a container shipped to your house or to your building or to your factory in a couple of days, and it's plug and play. Same as a desalination plant, really. So yeah, we will be seeing distributed hydrogen production probably beside factories. You will see big hydrogen factories to export in this international trade that we need. Maybe change it to ammonia to make it easier to transport or whatever. But I see a bright future for green hydrogen. I think there's still a competitiveness issue, big competitiveness issue. But again, technology, economies of scale will start playing a big role there. But yeah, I see a bright future for green hydrogen in Chile.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's also a question of how much is going to, in terms of export-import of hydrogen, how much is going to be the premium that you're buyer is going to be able to is going to buy. And I think it's very interesting to see developments such as the carbon border adjustment mechanism in the EU or the things that are happening in the US, because maybe you're going to be able to compete on price much earlier than what we had thought in terms of hydrogen. Actually, Harvard Business School wrote last year a case of green hydrogen in Chile, which was taken from the experience of Minister Jovet and actually a student that I don't think is here, Benjamin Maluenda, who was writing that policy for the Ministry of the Energy. So it's very interesting to see if you want to take a look at green hydrogen that take that HBS took last year. I think we're exactly on time, 10:59 on time, on revised time, right, on Chilean time.
Updated time.
On updated time. Thank you. I want to, absolutely thank you to all the panelists, particularly Professor Reinhardt, that actually moved an appointment for half an hour for us. And it was fascinating discussion. If I can just leave you with one word, I think we spoke about, the political challenges, the technical challenges, and got a lot of first impressions of challenges, examples of how the Commonwealth is managing these challenges, which is always world class. Things that we're doing in Chile, a little bit of a little bit of difficulties, but also a lot of hope, right? And I think really, Felipe, was wonderful to hear you and see how technology is trying to overcome these solutions. And hopefully, how can policy accompany this, and really to understand, and I think all the panelists said that this is not only both a resources and a political challenge, but very much also a social challenge, right? About social innovation, about how ESG and how do you build the communities into it, because you may have all the technology there, but if you're not able to build, sustainably in accordance to your own communities, those transmission lines, those plants, etc., you're going nowhere. So it's really important that the whole community understand that these challenges is from us all and not for just a couple of people in the industry. So with that, again, please give me give me a big applause to the panel. And
Thank you, everybody. Now we have a coffee break, half an hour, and at 11:30 again in the room. Thank you. Thank you. A great panel.
Thank you very much.
Oh, I was happy to do it. Yeah. Yeah, okay.
Can we get a picture with the panel? And then we let Forrest go. Super. Thank you, sir. Sí, estuvo bueno, ¿no?
So I've begun to think about a follow-up email on all of this to write, what are the ideas, what are the things we can pursue. There was a dramatic reduction in kind of international engagement that during the big, like, let's be honest. I mean, they did send a delegation to India. I was part of that. But other than that, it was very little. Is it energy related? But it's on very specifically energy. Right. So we should organize a follow-up meeting to discuss specifics. But I'll have to make the case to our leadership too. I mean, I know it's binding, so it shouldn't be an argument, but I will probably have to make an argument that we dedicate some resources. I'll send a note around, and then we can go from there with 5 or 6, based on our conversation and then today. I already have 5 or 6 ideas about concrete, what can we do. And then we could add to that, and then we prioritize. Yeah, I think it's very important.
Today a project does not fail from a technical perspective. It fails from a social perspective. If a group of 10 people don't want your project in your area, that's it.
You cannot do it without taking care of it and make them part of the plan.
That's why we're bringing the, MIT Media Labs in the sense to work with the technology, how to work together.
Very good. Maybe my Spanish will improve.
Well, you went to Bariloche.
Yeah, I did.
His son is in Bariloche.
Yes. My youngest boy is down there for his last year of high school. So I was there for all of August. Buenos Aires, 4 days, and then Bariloche.
So when you go to Bariloche, you're invited to Santiago. Next time.
Next time, yes.
Next time you have to.
I'm a good hiker over the mountains.
His wife is Argentine.
You can cross to Puerto Vallarta.
His wife is Argentine. So it's Argentine. And you don't speak Spanish. So you know a few words.
A few, yes. I was able to order coffee and beer, yeah, and buy vegetables and fruit. Oh, wonderful. Yeah, me too. Oh, good. Well, there's so much. It's very hard to kind of condense it to, we have 30 or 40 programs. But. Yes. Yeah, right. And Sandy and Jim Bowen, were you working? Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm still in touch with them. I talk to them all the time. Oh, good. Okay. Right. Oh, okay. Right. Yeah. No, he's at Saudi Aramco now. He left about a year ago. Yeah. So we have a new head of investment. She's great, Hillary Flynn. Wonderful. Yeah. Okay. Oh yeah, I think I can. Yeah. Like I said, all of that international work just faded away with the big movements. So, and it's not an irrational argument. I could see why if you're a small government person, I could see why that's one of the things you'd cut. But I don't support that personally. I think this stuff is actually. I think a lot of people just say, "Oh, I love this stuff," and don't really believe it. I actually believe it. I think the international dialogue is really important. It can't be like our primary focus, but I think it's really important, not only for diplomacy, but for actual exchange of information and best practices. Like, there's no doubt, like, Massachusetts is a global leader, but we have some blind spots. So, well, and honestly, and I told Fernanda this, that, you'd think that the most interaction that we would have had over the last 4 to 5 years would be mostly from, like, developed economies. And that's predominantly true. Most of our interaction, like I'm talking about, like, since the era that you described, Germany, certainly, and India, but Chile. I mean, Chile is right up there and the UK. Like, those are the 4 countries where we've had the most, I think, substantive discussions over the last decade. So I think that tells you something about Chile and its interest not only in clean energy, but also in international dialogue, because it's up there with these heavy hitters, right? Makes sense. although we're now a block and a half away. So we've actually moved twice since the Sandy and Jim area, but still the same area. And it's still, I mean, we're in a beautiful building, 294 Washington. So right where the Irish famine kind of monument is or whatever, it's architecturally, it's beautiful, gorgeous building. It's, mid-century. A little bit, but not so much. I mean, we had sponsored them on and off for years because of their energy cohort, but honestly, they just have not supported energy companies, and after a while, I just got justify sponsoring guys anymore because, I mean, I appreciate and like what they do, but we're mission-based, we have to support clean energy companies. Yeah. And, I think that in a way that makes sense because a lot of the clean tech solutions are the deep tech or the hard tech, and that's not a particularly good fit for the mass challenge model. The mass challenge model is great for lighter lifts, earlier stage, but just less easier challenges. And I don't mean that like easier with a big E, but like it's software, or it's like it's not requiring lab space, or right. It's not hard tech. So good for them.
Waste treatment plants, generate 50 megawatts of each 1,000 tons a year of waste treatment. I was trying to investigate a little bit about the development in the waste treatment. What I've been found is that final disposal of the waste. So how can we start a conversation with people from Massachusetts in order to do something about it?
Oh yeah, we should set up a time to. Yeah,
I would like to show you what we are doing. We have offices here in Somerville.
Okay. And so to be clear, it's municipal solid waste, not sewage, not wastewater treatment.
Any waste.
Oh, okay.
Any waste. We have projects, TileMass project for work industry for sludge, generating electricity from sludge from factories, from fish factories.
Okay.
We have biomass projects.
So organic waste as well as.
Any kind of waste that contains carbon.
And what's the tech? Is it gasification?
No, we use the latest technology in incineration. Our chief engineer is an ex-Papco Wilcox, the company.
Okay. Yeah, I think it would make sense to connect with us and then also our the DEP, Department of Environmental Protection, that oversees waste management in the state. And I think it would be helpful to get, and I'm sorry I don't have any cards, but I'll send you a note.
Yep, it's called the core, and you got my contact on my message also.
Because getting some kind of a deck or something, then we can understand the technology and figure out.
I would like to have a meeting and show you what we are doing, our experience, and explore the possibilities of do something. I think that there's a lot to do.
Yeah, we're exporting a lot of waste. That's true from the state right now. Some of it's going to landfill, but a lot of it's being shipped by train to, I think, Pennsylvania, upstate New York. So
7 million population in the state. We can make 140 megawatts of power.
Yeah, and there are some waste. There are some incineration plants, as you probably are aware, in the state. know,
But
you
it's
probably know they're
all
not very,
technology.
and they're not very popular.
They're not very popular. It's all technology. That's the
Okay.
issue. And it's very contaminated. I know.
Yeah.
This technology now is drops clean water, potable water, pure, without any metals on it and so on. And the emissions are below the European and the US norm.
Okay, well, yes, let's definitely talk.
Yeah.
I'll send you a note.
Okay, perfect. Very good. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, good to meet you too.
Hope to see you soon.
No, no, todo va a tener que ser trabajado
Hello? Yeah. If we start with the people, that will be. Okay, there we go. Okay, I guess. It's interesting because
Test us.
people want to talk, right? They haven't seen each other. They just want to meet each other, which is interesting.
They can come in and ask questions at the end. So. Do we push to talk? Is that how it works?
I think this one is active. The green ones are open. Yeah, like that. Yeah. Okay, we're gonna start. Are we ready? Okay. Day 2. Okay. Talca y silencio. Talca, silencio. Okay, so we're gonna start. We start the day talking about the state of the art of energy in Chile, where we can go with the future. And an important topic that we want to cover in the ChileMass Innovation Day was investment, right? So we have all of these wonderful ideas, but how are we really tackling from the financial point of view, and how do we think in the mechanism that's gonna get us there with the real capital and the private capital that is gonna make us transition and go to what we will call carbon net zero, and everything that has to happen to countries, companies, and even at the home level. So I'm here with 2 distinguished panelists talking more about the investment in ESG times, in decarbonization. You know already, Yuli, one another hat I have. I'm also advisor to Closed Loop Partners in New York, who is the largest investment in circular economy in the United States. And I'm gonna be wearing the hat of also bringing in the Chilean reality to this panel, but also understanding how all of these pillars are important for the next wave of investment in this sector. So to start, I'm really excited to introduce you to 2 amazing people. One I have had the pleasure to work with, Libby and Brian, will welcome you here in the Chilean community, because I'm sure people is going to be way more interested in what you do now that they know what you do. So before just starting talking about investment, I feel that we need to go back to the basic of introducing yourself. How did you got to this idea of investment, which for Chile is starting in a way that is more formal, but you guys been doing it for a while. So how do you go to do this, and where are you at now in the firms that you're respectively working? So maybe we can start with you, Libby.
Sure. Hi, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here with you guys, and so glad that you heard from Felipe. Oh, I think this is on already. Can you hear me?
Yeah, okay. I think it's really, you have to really close.
Yeah, and glad that you heard from Felipe as well earlier. And but yeah, I came to investing not necessarily as certainly not in a very direct route, and probably not in a very purposeful route either. I came really through the route of technology development and entrepreneurship, and a focus on bringing innovations in technology that can address climate change to large and impactful scale. So I started off as an engineer by training. Brian and I actually met in school, which was great to have relationships that go back so far. And at the time, spun a technology that I was working on with some friends and colleagues out, and started a company that we actually based in India, and found an opportunity to use the technology we were working on to help build out the cold chain for dairy. And I came back to the US and started working on some solar technology at SunPower, and then had the opportunity to serve as a technical appointee at the Department of Energy, focused on establishing new resources for transitioning technology to manufacturing. And I was passionate about that because throughout my career, that's where I had seen technologies really struggle to scale. It's very capital intensive and there's still a lot of technical risk. So the people who usually fund the reduction of technical risk had kind of neglected that transition to manufacturing. And at the Department of Energy, we worked really across the government to establish several new resources for supporting that transition and the technology development. After that, I was excited to see what large corporations could do to accelerate technologies from early stages to having large impact. So I joined GE and led clean technology innovation across the company for a few years. And then I really had the great fortune of reconnecting with some yet old friends again at Breakthrough Energy Ventures, and became really excited about the platform that Breakthrough Energy Ventures is building to have several different tools to support innovation and technology development all the way through scale up and deployment. So I'll stop there. For me, investment has been a means to an end of figuring out how to support technologies in that transition and all the way to implementation and impact. And it's been great to be a part of it and glad to be here.
Thank you, Libby. Ryan.
Yeah, so I think this will be an example of there's many routes into venture capital. My story is quite different from Libby's. But yeah, so I did undergrad at Tufts Physics, and ultimately went to Washington, D.C. to follow my passion for hydrogen fuel cells. Acknowledging this was in 2001, so it was a bit early, right? But anyway, my father sat me down and said, hey, you're getting these offers to go to high finance in Wall Street, but you've never really talked about that. Is that really what you want to do? And I said, I had this great experience in Australia with my physics teacher there, and that's where we studied renewable energy and hydrogen fuel cells. That would be really cool. And so I sort of approached the trade group in Washington, D.C. and created a job for myself. So I worked for a nonprofit, but had some really, really interesting experiences working with VCs, startups, big companies, everyone who had an interest with power gen or transportation going hydrogen. And so after that, I went to MIT, where we met Libby, did a lot of cool things over there relative to energy. But I was sort of the guy at MIT that had this really deep clean tech experience, which was pretty rare at the time, because this is 2006, where the clean tech focus within venture was really just emerging. And so I got into venture capital because I was pulled into it. They found me on campus, two funds. One was Mass Green Energy Fund. The other one was Advanced Technology Ventures in Waltham. And they said, hey, you know a lot about clean tech. We want to do more, so can you help us out? And so that's where I got pulled in, and I learned a lot about venture capital. And I liked it. And so when I graduated MIT, I got recruited out to the West Coast to join one of the older standing, we call them the pioneering funds in clean tech. So mine was Nth Power. They were on Fund 4, while everyone else was on Fund 1. So I said, an opportunity to bet on experience. 5 wonderful years there. We would call the tailwinds we're having now, and we can talk more about that. But after that, I said, listen, I want to test myself as an entrepreneur. When you're early in venture, you always get this debate. Can you be a really seasoned, effective venture capitalist through pattern recognition, or do you have to be an entrepreneur yourself? And there's no right or wrong answer. It's just a debate. But at the time, I said, let me go try myself as an entrepreneur to be a better VC, or you see what happens. And so I have been a venture-backed CEO, acquired a patent out of Raytheon's innovation group, of all things, for actually agriculture, dairy, and did that for about 4 years. And then came back to investing, but this time on the strategic side. I led efforts for Konica Minolta in North America. And then, unexpected to me, McKinsey & Company came knocking, and they said, listen, we get asked all the time from our clients, how should big companies work with small companies, startups? And we don't really have a great answer. We never have. And so we need someone like you who's a practitioner. Would you like to come join us? And so I said yes. And it was wonderful because I got to study corporate venture capital, done well and mostly done really poorly, but across, let's say, 7 different case studies, right? And work with clients in problem solving some of the major issues. And so that was certainly a good experience for me. And then after that sort of brings me to what I'm doing now. COPEC had been working on what their strategy should be. And we got together, and ultimately they wanted me to come in and leave McKinsey to run what they were designing. And so in late 2019, they handed me sort of a sketch out of what they wanted, and I said, okay, I'll try to make that real. And sort of the rest is history. But yeah, so what I do now is I head up Wind Ventures, which is COPEC's corporate venture capital arm. We are in San Francisco for strategic reasons, objectively strategic reasons, because we scout globally for the world's best across 3 themes: energy, mobility, and retail. And we want to attract the best into the region, really for 2 things. One, to do partnership or knowledge exchange activities with COPEC, so COPEC can say, hey, these are some areas that we should go into to help our transformation. But also by doing that to help Chile and the daily lives of Chileans. That's certainly on our minds every time we do this. And so just in a final comment, we've been doing this since really 2020 when I got the team together, and we now have a portfolio of 16, most of them with some sort of partnership opportunity. With COPEC, where we have a second group called the Wind Garage, which is very, very important, and there's a flow from the Wind Garages here. Our value beyond capital is what we call unfair access to Latin America, to global founders. And that's how we do it well. We have my group scouting globally, but we have the partnership teams who are the local teams separate from core to co-create and co-capture value with these amazing startups.
Thank you, Brian. Today we're calling the panel Impact Investment. And I wanted to go back to definitions, right? So we have a group among investors that we go to impact meetings, and there's many different types of impact investment. People who is investing in education, which is also impact. People who is investing in social causes, which is social entrepreneurship and impact. But we're also in the times of facing what is going to happen with the regulations of ESG, right? And climate change. So from your own funds, so how you are kind of deploying capital, how are you guys defining impact in your respective funds?
Yeah, this is a great question because everyone defines it differently, and it's really important to understand, especially for any entrepreneurs in the room or investors who might look to syndicate with other investors. It's really important to understand what everybody's kind of business model is. So I'll tell you a little bit about Breakthrough Energy Ventures first, because I think that will help set some context. Breakthrough Energy Ventures was started a handful of years ago, really under the leadership of Bill Gates, as he wanted to get more personally involved in addressing climate change. It really started off as a policy effort where he and several of his colleagues worked with many, many companies who have who were very like-minded, that solutions to reducing emissions could also be exceptional business opportunities. So he worked with leaders of these companies to work with governments from around the world to kind of evolve a commitment to double R&D expenditures for clean technologies and technologies that could decarbonize sectors that today do not have solutions for decarbonization. And when they announced that policy initiative, Bill personally stood up and said, we're not putting this all on the private sector, or sorry, not putting this all in the public sector. Private sector has a stake in this too, and we're going to commit capital to this as well. So he, at the time, committed to a $1 billion venture fund to invest in technologies that can also decarbonize anything really across the entire economy. He ended up bringing the team in, raised the fund, and we're now investing out of our second fund. We have around 20-some amazing investors into our fund who are all very much like Bill, entrepreneurs and business leaders from around the world. And we invest in anything across the economy that can dramatically reduce carbon emissions. And importantly, represent a very significant investment opportunity. And the overall thesis of our fund is that climate change is absolutely real. It's causing more and more severe impacts on the global economy every year, every week, every day. And therefore, the entire economy needs to essentially be rebuilt. And there are several sectors of the economy that do not yet today have technical solutions for decarbonization. And those solutions represent the opportunity to be the seed of rebuilding the economy and build the next generation of absolutely massive and valuable companies. So what we do, how we think about impact, is we screen for opportunities for a massive reduction in carbon emissions. It usually has some sort of core technology at the center of it. For us, it doesn't necessarily have to, but that's usually the case. And then anything that passes that screen, we look for an opportunity to have an outstanding investment return. And so for us, we are not only investing for the impact, but the combination of impact and returns. And we're very fortunate that our portfolio is performing quite well under that thesis to date.
Yeah, I think impact, we're certainly an impact fund, but I think you're right. There's a lot of different flavors of impact. In fact, I think the era of venture capital we're in is specialized VC funds, right? So it's everyone is doing venture capital, the expected 30% IRR after 10 years, but there's so much capital out there. You have to have a second hook. You have to have a second line of impact, saying, hey, we can do that. Plus, there's something that is hopefully distinctive and compelling to separate your capital from others' capital. So I think that's what we've been seeing. And so, for us, we have two equally weighted mandates. One is financial return, and the second is strategic value to COPEC. They are equal because I think the logic is if you don't have well-performing companies, it's really hard to get some strategic impact out of that endeavor, right? And so they are actually very much related. In fact, you need both. And so they're equally weighted, and we screen both equally. We'll typically screen for, I think, high potential investments. And then it's through conversation with the entrepreneurs where we get to talk about, hey, this unfair access that we offer, that's compelling, we think it's compelling, but it's distinctive. How might we leverage that for you? And that's, that takes several conversations, but we hold both of them. And then the third thing I think I alluded to a little bit, but we hope, number one and two, the financial performance, the good financial performance, which then lends itself to hopefully good strategic impact, then hopefully has a positive impact on Chile itself and the daily lives of Chileans. And so we assess that as well.
Yeah, I think what you're bringing to the table is what I hear a lot in the conversations in Chile. Is impact sacrifice financial returns? And I guess the answer is no. In the work we do at Closed Loop Partners, we look at from the perspective of circularity and the circulation of materials. There are $10 billion of materials in landfill that nobody has been able to create technologies to create returns in that materials that needs to get back and biosphere. The other metrics that they use is how much waste is reduced, how many works are you creating, and how the deployment of capital is creating the circular economy now in United States and expanding to Europe. So I think one myth to break today is that impact doesn't mean you're gonna make money. It has to, because an economy relies on creating the capitals to keep growing the lives of people and the economies of cities that we discussed yesterday. One of the things that we always think, and I'm putting my hat as an entrepreneur in my past life, is it looks really far away for an entrepreneur that is starting. I'm gonna go and pitch to an investor. They might have the technology, they might have the story, but I think with the years that we've been working in investment right now, what have you think the things that an entrepreneur had to start thinking when they're ready to receive capital in that seed, Series A, Series B? What has been your experience for that?
How to do it well?
Yes.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that come to mind. I think number one, just referencing a prior comment, the capital, there's a spectrum of capital to go after, right? So everyone is saying, listen, we want yield, yes, but we have the superpower that we want to leverage with our portfolio companies. That separates us from all the other firms. And so you have to really get to know what is their superpower, and does that work for you? Is that the type of partner that you want to work with, right? So in my case, unfair access to Latin America, are you ready to do that? Is that of interest to you, this TAM expansion opportunity that is somewhat of a light lift for you? For many it is, but for a lot it's not, and it's a timing issue usually. I say also, be prepared to have the pitch, but don't necessarily do the pitch, if you know what I mean. The best thing, because through the interaction, it's about two potential companies coming together with a North Star and aspiration to do something that's high risk and hopefully high impact and rewarding and also fulfilling. And you have to come at it with, this is a people-driven business, right? And so you need to get to know me if you're pitching me. You don't want to pitch me to do that, where you're talking and I'm just listening, right? You want to have your pitch deck, but you want to have a conversation. You want to get to know my background and what our secret power is, and have a conversation around how we can apply that to you. My first question, if I'm allowed to ask one, is always, what's your founding story? I'd love to hear that, because I have my own founding story when I did a startup. I just love to hear, how did you get here? How did we get here? And a lot of entrepreneurs, they go straight to their pitch deck. Here's the vision, here's the mission, here's the team. That's all really great stuff, but I could read that. I want to get deeper when I'm talking to someone and say, hey, are we going to be good partners? Can we do this together? So it's an approach.
It's a relationship.
Yeah, you're starting a relationship.
Yeah. Libby, what's your take?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I mean, first of all, fundraising is hard. Finding investments that you think make sense is also hard. It's a lot easier to put money out the door than it is to necessarily bring it back. But even still, it's challenging in both respects. And so I think the two things I would keep in mind as entrepreneurs is that it is hard, it takes time. You see a lot of announcements of these amazing rounds that have come together, and it looks like it just happened overnight. But there were months or years of blood, sweat, and tears, and sleepless nights, and health issues from stress, and who knows what else that obviously are not going to be in the press release. So just keep that in mind when it feels really hard, and like, why is everybody else doing this so easily? They're not doing it easily. And then the other thing is, for the investors that you bring on, you're interviewing them as well. You know, you are selling something to them that's very valuable, and that's equity in your company. It is a possibility to partner together to build something extremely valuable. And so you need to be selective with that. So, keep that in mind. I really like Brian's advice about, talk about how you got to where you are, hear how, to the extent that you can, make it almost a two-sided interview. Sometimes, at least initially, it's a little bit screening oriented, but keep it in mind that that you have something really valuable, and you should kind of exercise as much scrutiny on your investors as your investors will exercise on the companies that they're considering.
Yeah, and I think it's also the idea that you need to know when you need the capital. And that a no is not a no. It is not fitting within the investment hypothesis. So it's not that I'm not liking you. It's not a personal. It's more about, it's truly a matchmaking of vision, capital, and expectations of what that company is going to go.
Yeah, I think about it as hiring a board member and a whole bunch of support staff.
Yeah.
So what is that board member capable of? What is their firm, their support staff basically capable of? What have they done in the past? What does their portfolio represent to you in terms of opportunity for partnerships and synergy? And are they in the field? Do they know, how to partner with a company in these kinds of stages? So yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. So I want to go now in sectors, right? So that's the entrepreneur coming to us and asking and thinking, what is that side? But you are about at least sector agnostic, but with the big mission of decarbonization. So the first step is understanding that piece. And you have already developed some pillars of where the fund is now going and developing those sectors. Maybe we'd like to know more about that and how that was a decision potentially for you, Brian, in understanding that, because you're matching companies that want to go to Latin America. So how that went about?
Yeah, I mean, we have the three pillars, and just to remind, it's energy, mobility, and retail. These are the three areas that COPEC has a lot of resources, right? So going back to our superpower of how we can help entrepreneurs scale, it's opening those up to them so that they can leverage that and scale in a quicker way, but also with less risk. And so that's how we came about with those four pillars. We are doing some things further afield from that, and let's say category other more and more, because
it's always there. Entrepreneurs know that.
Yeah, because we are, but even within other, the lenses that I talked about before, where we look at financial return profile, we look at the strategic impact potential for COPEC plus on the entrepreneur. We're still using those. We are just finding other sectors outside those three pillars where we can find those sort of opportunities, and so that's quite exciting. Yeah, so I can go deeper into each one, but those are three pillars. So.
Yeah, and I think, Lily, what has been today the decarbonization? I mean, Ventures has been investing for a while now, so what have you think is now and what's coming in this investment for decarbonization?
Yeah, it's a broad scope.
Yep.
How long are we going to be here? We've got a lot of work to do, everybody. But maybe I'll just try to sketch out a little bit. So yeah, as Yuli mentioned, we invest in anything across the economy that can lead to decarbonization and a pretty significant reduction of carbon emissions. We divide it up into 5 categories: electricity, transportation, manufacturing, buildings in the built environment, and food and ag. But that doesn't necessarily narrow down the universe, because if there's something that doesn't fit into one of those categories neatly, we'll stick it in somewhere. So yeah, our team is incredibly, incredibly broad. Maybe what I will say is in terms of like what's next. The early 2000s and before then even was the era of a lot of innovation in wind and solar, which have now become extremely mainstream. Some of the lowest cost of energy technologies you can deploy, widely deployed, very risk, the risk has been almost completely eliminated. People finance these deployments with extremely low cost of capital, for example. But when you look at how far they've penetrated, they're only, single-digit percentages of electricity generation globally. So you have to ask, well, why is that? We've been at this a while, and it's absolutely the lowest cost resource that you can deploy. And there are several reasons. Obviously, they're intermittent. And so once you account for the intermittency, and if you want to have firm power, the costs all of a sudden are actually higher than competing costs like natural gas and coal. The resources aren't necessarily in the places where there's demand for electricity. So then you start to need long duration storage, you need extremely low cost storage, you need transmission. And then there are a whole number of sectors that do not have economic technologies today that can eliminate carbon emissions. So, steel, for example, concrete, cement production for concrete, that one's kind of a sneaky one because they are another, the production of cement is another process that actually liberates geological sources of carbon and puts it in the atmosphere. So that's a tricky one we need to pay a lot of attention to. So I think some of those industries are now starting to gain more appreciation and the role that they can play in transitioning to a really fully clean economy. Thinking about transportation, early 2000s also, we saw a lot of advancements in lithium-ion batteries that are now enabling electric vehicle electrification. And really early on in our fund, we started thinking about our thesis in the supply chain to enable the truly scalable production of batteries. And we are very happy to be partnering with Lilac Solutions. You heard from Felipe, I think, earlier, who has a great technology to open up new lithium production assets and also do so in a environmentally benign manner, which is really important to us as well. So now we're thinking about, okay, what are the supply chain materials, and also beyond lithium for electrification, nickel, cobalt, how do you develop battery technologies that use different materials, for example. So we're starting to think in general about, okay, for the technologies that exist, how can we make them cheaper? How can we think about how to make them more ubiquitous or perform better, like through long duration energy storage, things like that. Thinking about supply chains, and then an area for us that we found there really has not been a lot of entrepreneurial activity until recently is food and ag. So we've been really excited about food and ag. I could go on and on, but maybe I'll stop there as a few examples.
Yeah, no, it's true because I'm going to spell a secret with Libby. The first step when Libby goes into this is, okay, how many CO2 are we going to save? And it's exciting because it's agnostic, but it goes across the economy, and it gets harder for developing the investment hypothesis, but it's what really has to happen. So that's exciting piece of what we do here. I'm going to share a little bit of the closed loop because I think it will be relevant for us to kind of spread out the spectrum of technologies that also require this type of investment. Closed loop invested in Algramo in Chile. And I remember the times when Unilever is one of the limited partners of Closed Loop, and approach Ron, the CEO in New York, and say, we have this company from Chile. And luckily, there was a Chilenita in the fund that could translate what this really means. And Algramo is really creating a model of refilling, because closed loop, one of the materials that has focused in the first 6 years of existence is plastics, right? So we have all of this movement of what is going to happen to plastics, but we don't really have solutions. And Algramo is being piloting and testing the refilling of packaging, so you don't need to make more bottles of shampoo, more bottles of things. And probably the people in Santiago, in the almacenes, know Algramo as a local entrepreneur that really is making impact in the city, but now they are deploying commercial locations here in the United States and also in Europe. So why an investor from United States will look at Algramo? Well, the model that is occurring in Santiago de Chile could be really important for the rest of the world. And the amount of waste in the monomers and the PET that has to be reduced in the planet can start from those local examples. So looking also agnostic in geography helps you find those entrepreneurs that are going to create that impact in investment, but also in the changes of societies that we are creating with these technologies as we enable them to exist in different supply chain, manufacturing processes, companies that want to kind of shift business and move on. I want to open the podium for questions, but I think from the previous panel we got in a conversation on this clean tech 1.1, 1.0, Brian say. But we've been talking a lot about hydrogen, and hearing your story that you started there, I wanted to take this panel also to talk about hydrogen, because Chile has put a lot of effort in thinking in hydrogen. And I would love to hear your perspectives in how are we seeing that as the next thing, and especially in our sector, for the mining sector, is something that we really continue to look and how we decarbonize that industry. Go for.
Yeah. So the attention with hydrogen is nice for me personally, because again, I started my career there. There was a lot of talk about the hydrogen economy under the second Bush administration when I was in DC, but it really didn't go anywhere. But it was sort of an introduction of the concept. And the concept is that, hey, hydrogen can come from many different pathways, feedstocks, meaning it can be made from many different ways, but then it can also be used in many different ways, right? So it's sort of an energy carrier, if you will, a little bit like electricity. And so this could help decarbonize the energy landscape, because you could start with sort of low carbon but not no carbon ways of producing hydrogen, and then get the utilization technologies, either the internal combustion engines or the fuel cells or what have you, to use hydrogen sort of out there in the field. And then at the right time, when cost is down, you can then sort of insert green molecules, if you will, because everything is now set up. That's the concept anyway. My perspective now is that it's an energy carrier with a lot of unknowns on what the actual use cases are going to be. But what's exciting is that there's a lot of interest in it, and we're now seeing very large, I don't know if you call them pilots, but very large constructions and production systems, and meant to go into fueling ships and even cars, or trucks even. But at the same time, you've got Maersk, at least what I know publicly, Maersk sort of promoting not hydrogen or ammonia, but actually methanol. And so you're seeing sort of a very heterogeneous landscape of what will happen, and so it's going to be interesting. But there's a lot of money being thrown at it. I think from the Wind Ventures point of view, it's clear, right? So we have the advantage of saying, listen, we scout globally, so it's a global local model. We call it GLOCAL. And we get to test our investment theses with the Chilean geography. And so I probably don't need to say much about hydrogen in Chile, but if you know that the cost of green hydrogen, 60 to 80% of that cost is the cost of renewable energy, and then you say, where in the world has the cheapest renewable energy? It's Chile. The best solar and wind resource, but also the longest capacity factors for both. And then you can even combine the two, maybe, because the capacity factors don't overlap exactly. That's another benefit. So better than Australia and even the Middle East. And so there's a tremendous unfair advantage, if you will, from a geographic perspective. So the clarity that we get in our investment thesis is saying, okay, this is the pathway, this Chilean geographic pathway is what we are going to focus on, which would be sort of renewable energy to likely a PEM electrolyzer of some sort that can handle intermittent power into something, maybe a pipeline that could act like a buffering battery of some sort. And that was actually, we made an investment in that called H2 Pro out of Israel. So what's also interesting, I'll point out, back in the day, you had 3 types of electrolyzers, and there was no fourth. You had PEM, solid oxide, and alkaline. everything was pushed into those things. We're now seeing brand new categories, sort of the reinvention. So H2 Pro is a total reinvention. Actually, the inspiration is from a flow battery. We're now seeing, saying, hey, PEM is low temperature, solid oxide is high temperature, but the waste heat we can get out of a lot of industrial waste is sort of in the middle. Let's create a new one for that, because then we take that heat direct on. It's a new category of electrolyzer. And so I think it's getting really, really interesting, but our focus has been on how to create momentum around Chile. And that was the whole thesis behind H2 Pro, where in combination with what Chile has naturally could be really, really interesting.
Livy.
And for us, we've looked at hydrogen first and foremost as an industrial gas that's used and consumed throughout different industries for a number of purposes, and it's extremely carbon intensive to produce this material. It's usually produced through steam methane reforming that, again, liberates carbon from natural gas. And so our priority has been to first of all, just decarbonize that industrial process. So how can we make hydrogen without evolving CO2 and from the steam methane reforming process? And so we have done a lot of work across all these different categories. Agree there are new categories now of producing hydrogen, and have made several different investments in electrolysis, in methane pyrolysis, and other ways of producing hydrogen. And then we're also starting to look at new applications for hydrogen. There's going to be a debate, I think, for quite a while about hydrogen use in industrial processes like steel making, transportation, things like that. We certainly think that there's an opportunity for hydrogen for really tough to decarbonize transportation sectors like aviation in certain circumstances, and then for other very difficult to decarbonize transportation sectors, we think that liquid fuels will be around for a long time. So we've been looking at ways to produce liquid fuels in a scalable manner. And the feedstocks that we think are most scalable are CO2 and hydrogen. And guess what the biggest cost component of producing fuels ends up being? It's hydrogen. So by working on ways to reduce the cost of hydrogen and to produce hydrogen without emitting CO2 emissions, that's our kind of primary focus today, and that will have impact in all these different applications that may arise.
Yeah, so the future is in Chile, and we need to do it environmentally, and we need to understand the business model quicker so we can be there for the world. I want to open the panel to questions from you guys. I have asked most of the questions right now, but anybody in the audience who wants to raise their hand and ask? Alan, and then Pedro.
Thank you. I have a quick question for Brian. Based on your experience, one thing is the financial return of the investment. So when you have a strategic investment, I guess another challenge is how do you do it once you close the deal to be able to incorporate that investment in the business units? How's Copec's experience been in that sense? And what can we learn from that experience?
Yeah, great question. This is sort of how do you build the capability to do this well, right? And so, when we designed this over probably a year. Copec has been thinking about this for much longer, but actually designing how do we build this specific Copec capability, world class, over a year of that. And we talked a lot about that, but we solved for being distinctive, our value, and that's the unfair access to Latin America. No one had really gone to North America or Europe to offer that to global services and bridge south, so we think we're still the first, so distinctive. We think it's compelling because of what's happening in Latin America. Growing affluency in the middle class, everyone has a smartphone, really high urbanization rates. It's a large, across the continent, it's very large. It's actually, from people, it's larger than the US. And then to your question, how do we make that real, that unfair access? And we worked very, very hard on that. And so wind is really an open innovation platform. It's not a corporate venture capital firm. What I run is part of it, but it's not it entirely. And so there's really two groups on this wind platform that COPEC owns. One is my team, obviously, and I've explained what we do. We scout globally and try to bring the best and the brightest to Chile. The other team is called the Wind Garage, and there's actually two of them now. There's one in Chile and there's one in Colombia. And these teams are actually much larger than Wind Ventures. There's separate teams for each of our pillars, energy, mobility, and retail. And they get to think about new opportunities and new directions for COPEC to go into. They get to launch new businesses if they feel like they have the three key ingredients: tech, talent, and knowledge. And for us, they're the partnership team, where typically everyone says this is a good opportunity, but we're lacking the technology and probably the knowledge also. So let's bring in a partner to do that together. But they're dedicated, they're separate from core. So it's a startup-friendly and dedicated capability to do exactly what you asked about. So it's not an inexpensive capability to build, but in our case, it was the right way to do it.
Pedro.
Thank you. I'd like to ask a question to Libby. Brian referred a little bit to ammonia. So I wanted to know your perspective with respect to green ammonia production as an energy vector as well, because of the production possibilities, but also the easy way of probably storing and transport nowadays, and the reverse reaction that can occur and can finally produce even nitrogen. So what is your perspective?
Yeah. Ammonia is another really important industrial kind of material, and we have been looking at it for how can you kind of leverage renewables to produce ammonia. So similar to the thesis behind H2 Pro about the possibility to integrate kind of hydrogen production into renewable energy assets, we also have been working on a thesis in that regard. We have one portfolio company called Remo that is building these integration solutions, and then agree that it could be a good hydrogen carrier. It could be an actual energy carrier for use in transportation or other purposes. So yeah, definitely been paying attention to that.
Thank you. I just want to do the educator of me. Investment hypothesis is what we believe it will make it. That's the definition. And then you.
Thank you. Just one question for both. In this equation, you have corporations, and probably you are in the innovation part, but when you go to the business, you got a lot of problems in terms of explaining the business or to go to the board to defend what you have. So tell us, I have that problem, with big and more corporations, so every time I try to sleep, I don't have the right answer, so I just wake up in the morning and say, what am I going to say to this guy? Because I see the innovation, but they don't see it. So it's me, or it's you, it's both. So what's it, in your experience, because for you, Brian, are in San Francisco, but Quebec is in Chile, you have to build those bridges, and in your case, it's the same thing. So you have some, I don't know, guessing with that.
Yeah, well, do you want to start?
Happy to start, yeah. In my opinion, especially given my McKinsey work, this is where a lot of corporates sort of get it wrong, because CVC is what I think, from the outside in perspective, what most corporates do for external innovation.
Yeah.
The reality is that it's one of a spectrum of models to engage startups, right? And going to CVC is saying you're going to the deepest way to engage startups and really the most difficult to do well and the most expensive, because you need investment and everything else. And so I think it's to all corporates' benefits to take a step back and say, hey, this is our growth strategy for the next 10 years. Yeah, this is sort of CEO and board level discussion, but here's our growth strategy. where does engaging startup fit in? What are the objectives to engage startups? Is it to market sense? We just want to know what's going on. We don't feel our core is at risk. The best model to do that would probably be a scouting group, maybe in some locations. If it is, hey, no, our core business is actually really at risk. We don't know when, but we know, people they're not going to be buying our stuff for real reason. That's where you may want to, hey, we should go into new directions. A CVC allows us to get on the cap table, do really thorough diligence, and to then be able to make really high-quality partnership decisions, but also influence M&A and actually transform ourselves to future-proof, right? Just two sort of examples on the bookends. And so the key of that, and if you do that, you will have the right model for the objectives. And you'll have these objectives that are now part of corporate strategy that you will always be able to reference as the North Star of why you exist to whoever's asking. Either middle management, I exist to do this. It's part of corporate strategy. Or if the board, right? Hey, remember, we're doing this for corporate strategy. Here I'm making this recommendation. The impact is X, Y, and Z, and it's all aligned with this, right? So it's a way to justify your investments and what happens.
Yeah, so Brian has really studied this, so I would, that's probably just barely scratching the surface. I can kind of reflect based on my time at GE, where I saw a lot of this from inside the company, and just based on the corporate partners that we work with across our portfolio. But so, my experience, this is certainly not to kind of opine on what's good or bad, or what was like good or bad or well done or poorly done at GE. I think GE had a great, they were a leader, like way ahead of their time, all the way from the CEO, really through employees, about the possibility to grow the business with new technologies that are clean technologies, reduce carbon or renewable energy. So I think they really had strong strategic direction. They had a lot of employee support, and then so they had kind of the will and the engagement to do it. The patience was harder. And so when you are a part of an operating company that's a multi-billion-dollar company, and the business lines that are getting resources on an annual basis are multi-billion-dollar business lines themselves, and you're starting to kind of develop innovative ideas from inside, I found that the patience for new ideas was about 18 months. Yeah. And the level at which a new idea kind of got attention and resources was once it broke around $1 billion in the top line for the P&L. And like, show me a single startup that goes from 0 to $1 billion in top line in 18 months. It doesn't exist. No. So internal innovation within a corporate environment can be really, really difficult, was my takeaway from my N of 1 sample size. So I think working with startups externally is a great way to kind of support some of the early stages of exponential growth and then realize the value of the later stages of exponential growth, because like that's what people are so bad at judging is, okay, this is growing, it feels like it's growing slowly, it's still really small, but the rates are good, but the top line is small. But when the rates are good, then the top line gets really big really fast, but not until the second half of the chessboard, if you're familiar with that analogy. So it's always harder to do things with more than one entity. Like, it's hard to work internally, collaboratively internally within a single entity, so it's always harder to do it externally. But where I find that it works really well to partner either as a partnership or equity investment or whatever with an external entity that's a startup is where you think the corporate entity won't really have patience to see the exponential growth kind of in the early years. Hope that helps.
Yeah, and I think it's also about risk, right? So in the cap table, when the corporate investor is there, it's also you're de-risking the company, because you could have that type of access to resources that the company can make it because now they have a corporate in the cap table. So I think from the side of the entrepreneur, it's a really important de-risking opportunity for the business at the right time, I will add. Okay, so Libby, I know you have to go, so I'm going to close it to the last one with him, and then we finish the panel.
Just very straightforward, practical question for each of you. What would be, I know it varies depending on the investment, but what would be your average ticket size in terms of investment? What would be your average expected internal rate of return to see how much of the company is willing to offer? And what would be the average range for an exit in terms of years? So to see if we can fit in with what you're looking for.
Yeah, happy to start. We are, we invest pretty early, so we will invest, even down to $100K, a couple $100K, very, very early stages, and kind of inception stage, pre-seed and seed, and Series A. Those are our really core positions where we'll enter. Occasionally, we'll do a B. Earlier in our existence, we had a much broader spectrum of when we would make a first investment. And then the check sizes for the first investment kind of vary based on the stages. And we do look for, over 10x return on all invested capitals, not just the first investment, but we'll, follow on, if the company is doing well and we feel like it's sticking to our thesis together. So we expect well over a 10x return from our successful investments. And when you do kind of the math on those sorts of things, you find out pretty quickly you need really like over $1 billion exit for that kind of math to work out.
Any time frame of exit?
Yeah, we have a longer life fund. We have a 20-year fund. That's not saying that we're expecting to exit everything in the last few years of that fund. It does give us a little bit more opportunity for our really exceptionally growing companies, for us to hold on to some of those for a little bit longer and realize some later value creation. But yeah, it varies. But again, patience is a thing that
Most fun, so
yeah,
it's a hard one.
yeah.
Yeah, for us, the investment strategy is pretty straightforward. For us, it's Series A or later, but we like the later because I think, as I explained, we do cross-border investments, and so there's an element of added risk there. So later is one way to mitigate that. But Series A or later, check size $2 million to $6 million. We've done up to $30 million when the conviction runs super high, but it's typically a portfolio of 2 to 5 for the first check. And then on follow-ons, yeah, we want to be there as a growth partner for those who are still aligned with the original thesis or something as interesting. And that's typically our pro rata. And then timing to exit, we got actually pretty lucky with the whole SPAC stuff, and so we had 2 well-performing SPACs, so earlier than expected. But really the expectation is you build your portfolio. Ours is sort of ours is 2 things. Ours is balance sheet investing, and so there's no end of life, but we manage it as a group as if it's a 10-year fund, just we can compare against benchmarks. And so first 3 years, build out the portfolio, the remaining of that fund, 7 years, nurture that portfolio. So we've just completed our fund 1, let's say, portfolio 1 rather. And next year we'll start building out portfolio 2. That's just internal accounting stuff. But then we can compare against benchmarks.
Expected IRR range?
Better than top tier, which is what we're doing.
Yeah. Well, with that, we're going to conclude our last panel for the day. We start in a really high tone. We are ending in a really high tone. Thank you so much for being here for the ChileMass community. It's exciting what you're doing, Brian, in Chile. Libby, welcome to the family. I'm going to announce Brittany to kind of close the panel, but in this one we're closing, and then Brittany is going to give the final words of the day. So that's how we're ending today, and I pass it to you, Brittany.
thank you, everyone. I'm really delighted to be here and to say just a word of thanks on behalf of the board. So my name is Brittany McDonough. I've been part of ChileMass since before ChileMass existed, which is really cool, and we'll tell that story in a second. But again, thank you for joining us. Thank you to all of the panelists. And really just a big expression of thanks on behalf of the board to Fernanda and the team. Really just claps, honestly. It's been a great 2 days, and we've kind of hit a milestone yesterday at Venture Cafe. It was arguably the most successful Venture Cafe in history. It was at the Cambridge Innovation Center. I've been going for years, and it was literally standing room only. So on behalf of the board, we want to welcome all of you really into the community. If you're new to the community, we are a nonprofit, and as board members, we're all volunteers. So it's exciting to see what a dedicated community can do, both to drive an ecosystem, but also to create meaningful links for commercial endeavors and for innovation. My day job is I am with the Abu Dhabi Investment Office, and I lead all of our innovation practice across the government of Abu Dhabi for foreign direct investment into the Emirate. There's a lot of alignment between what Abu Dhabi is doing and Chile, believe it or not. But I'm from Boston, and I met Yuli a decade ago when I was in the governor's office for trade and investment there as well. And this kind of concept of what we're doing, we were sitting on a bench in the public garden, literally talking about what can we do. And it's been an incredible decade of work together, but what we're excited for is the next step of that. So I just want to share a little bit of information about what we're doing as a team, as part of ChileMass, and how you can get involved. So on an individual side, these connections happen because of people. So if you are in an industry and you have a speaker here that you think that you can engage with, we would love to make sure we make that connection. But also, if you want to be more engaged with what we're doing, you're also very welcome to be involved with ChileMass, either as a volunteer or in any other capacity. We also, as a nonprofit, depend on both fundraising and financing. So we are open, certainly, to donations on the philanthropic side, but generally, as a nonprofit, we're always in fundraising mode. I think I'm just always personally in fundraising mode. And on the corporate side, there is a really engaging program called the ChileMass Hub, and it is the best network, honestly, if you're a corporate that's entering the market into Boston, and you have access to everybody literally at any time. So you're able to connect both on the industry side and the government side, which in Boston, it's certainly very helpful to be part of government. So with that, I think we're just a few minutes over, but thank you again. We're going to take a big group picture if everyone can come down and just cluster together. So thank you.